Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm genuinely buzzing today. I've not just got my boss with me, I've got one of my best mates with me. You're a proper mate, Ian Gilbert.
Yeah, I exist. I'm
You're
real.
I was
I'm
just
here.
saying to you before the podcast, I've probably spoke of you at least 100 times. I don't know if that's too many because I've only done 150 episodes, but I just needed people to know you're not a mythical figure.
I exist.
So, Ian Gilbert from Independent Thinking,
yeah,
ITL,
ITL.
just to shorten it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited for this episode, mate,
Yeah.
because, I do a lot of episodes with teachers, people in education in all forms, and eventually it does come down to the Book of Thunk. So, to me talking about philosophy for children, and
Yeah.
I don't know, sort of, you met me through Martin,
Yeah.
and then I came and did a gig and met all the other ITLers, and I was like, I just felt set. I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't know people understood that education was slipping and failing and struggling, and there was actually other people going, that's a bit nonsense, isn't it? So can we talk about ITL, Independent Thinking? It's the 30th birthday coming up as well, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
So the history, take us away. Because I know
30 years of history, yeah.
I'll just say, I've had your wonderful daughter on the podcast, Phoebe,
yeah.
and it was literally the day I got home from having my ACL replaced, and they put me on all this medication, and she's an amazing human, but she let me just talk.
Yes,
And
I did
boy,
hear that podcast
mate,
with you interviewing yourself.
Oh my God, I was sweating, I was smiling, I was trying my best, but
Yeah.
I listened to it back and I just cringed my little butt off. So I really want you to do some of the talking today and just tell us about ITL and everything.
Yeah, okay, no, that's right. Yeah, I did wonder who would be talking most. So far it's you, but let's see if I can reclaim the mic.
I don't know.
Yeah, so Independent Thinking, 30 years old. May 4th is the Star Wars Day. That's our actual birthday.
On purpose?
No, I think it was only a couple of years ago I realised it was.
Oh.
It was that date. I went into teaching. I was a French teacher for a while in Northampton, but I'd gone into teaching because I wanted to focus with young people on thinking and learning and memory and motivation and creativity and goal setting and all the stuff that I wished I'd been told when I was at school. I was at school in Leicestershire and did well with O-levels as they were then and A-levels, and a head boy at the school and top grades A-levels and Durham University, and I was a success of that system, if you like. Did a French degree at Durham University, and then didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was sure I'd never wanted to be a teacher. I was adamant that wasn't for me, and ended up doing a thing called a diploma in entrepreneurial management at the business school in Durham after I finished my degree. So this would be 89, 90, something around about then. And we had this, and had various talks over the course of the year, over the weekends. Every few weekends we'd be at Dubs, at the business school in Durham, and it involved me working as well in Hartlepool in industry. I was convinced that I didn't want to work in industry in Hartlepool for the rest of my life. It was the paper industry, and I didn't want to become a paper man, as it were. I had more to offer, I felt. And one of the talks we had at the business school in Durham was this guy talking about the psychology of success, is what he called it, and it sort of all sounded sort of weird, sort of American stuff.
Tony Robbins.
Yeah. Well, this is before I heard of him.
Okay.
But did lead indirectly to me finding out about him, because I wanted to borrow from a friend a book that I thought the guy in Durham Business School had used, and actually I ended up getting the Tony Robbins book by mistake, and then started reading Tony Robbins, and then it was like, this stuff is amazing. But it's the people who predate Tony Robbins in terms of the motivational stuff and the believing in yourself and the goal setting, and I can't remember the name of the guy now. But I remember thinking at the time, this is amazing. Why didn't anybody tell me this when I was 16 or 14? Why? I was a success of the system, but that was based on, get your best grades and be a good boy. And suddenly I realised there's all this other potential that I had. And I remember thinking, it's like the education system for me, and I think for a lot of people who do well academically, it's like it felt like dropping I don't know, like a ball bearing or a marble down a pipe, and then when it comes out the other end, it just sort of rolls along the floor, but in exactly the same direction. So even though you're not guided anymore, you've not got any constraints, you just carry on in that same direction. And what this did to me, it was like, imagine putting a nail about an inch away from the end of that pipe, and as you send the ball bearings down, suddenly they go off in all directions. That's what it felt like to me. Suddenly, the world was my oyster. I could go in any direction that I chose to, and it was just down to whatever I thought. And I remember this guy saying, if you want a 40-foot yacht, put that as a goal. You can have a 40-foot yacht. It's fine. I remember thinking that I've always loved the sea. I've always looked at yachts, but I've never actually thought, I could never have a yacht. I hadn't even got to that point. It was just like, subconsciously, I just rejected all of those sorts of things. And suddenly it was like, well, if you can do whatever you want to do, you can do it. Just make that your goal and set about doing it. And I ended up with a 54-foot yacht because I'm an overachiever, and an overdraft and all that. But this realization that what you want to do, you can do. Just set that as your goal and sort of work towards it. And then I think, what I'd like to do is take that and put that to kids in schools, young people in schools. And I went from Hartlepool industry to working as a copywriter in Newcastle because I knew I had that creative streak in me and that writing, that sort of right brain, if you like, left brain, right brain stuff. But even then, that wasn't enough. And I was writing adverts for things like the Metro Centre, which at the time was Europe's largest shopping centre, I think.
What do you mean writing adverts?
I was writing adverts, radio commercials,
newspaper
adverts. I did a advert for Formica. We had the account for Formica as well, which was claim to fame. I even did a television advert for just local for the Co-op. But when you see the words that you've written being spoken out on halfway through Coronation Street, it's quite something. That's cool.
Exciting.
But then even then it wasn't enough, and then still determined not to be a teacher. I ended up going back to Durham University to the careers people there and just said, look, I left a few years ago, but just give me some thoughts, give me some ideas, but I don't want to be a teacher. And then every avenue that we sort of explored, it was like, well, have you thought about teaching? No, I don't. Okay, well, but I'm good at this, I can do that. Well, have you thought about? And okay, all right, I'll look into teaching.
Why was there so much reluctance there for teaching?
I think, my father was always very anti-teaching. It was just full of the tropes that so many people have about, they don't work very hard, they have long holidays, it's left in, all of that sort of stuff. So, which is interesting. I mean, he's passed on now, my dad, but the fact that I'm a father and I'm married to a head teacher, and my brother, who was also had the same views of teachers, he's married to a head teacher, and we've become a teaching dynasty, despite my father's comments. So,
and despite your reluctance, too.
But part of it as well is I didn't really know what was involved in this, and when I then became a teacher, and I realised it was the ultimate. Again, to use the sort of the cliche of the left brain, right brain, it was the ultimate whole brain thing. So you had to plan and be strategic and use that sort of logical, analytical part of your head. But it was the most creative thing you can do as well. It was then. I mean, we'll perhaps get onto that in terms of the constraints on teachers now, certainly from some of the larger, stricter academy chains where everything is monitored and measured and organised for them. So we have lost a lot of there's a danger that we're losing a lot of the creativity and the flexibility that teachers had at that point. But back then, as long as I was the right side of the law. Once I closed the classroom door, it was I could do whatever I wanted in all sorts of ways. So that it really brought to life that creativity. And also, I didn't really want to be a French teacher, teaching French to kids who didn't want to learn French. I mean, there's better things to do with my time. This was in Northampton, but it did allow me to start to work on all the stuff that I wanted to talk to kids about. So, creativity, mind mapping, learning skills, motivation, goal setting. So I was able to do all those sorts of things.
Because of that experience you had where you'd seen that motivational talk.
Yeah.
So you were this ball bearing going down this tunnel.
Yeah.
You're going into the newspaper world.
Yeah.
And then you had this epiphany.
Yeah.
Did it somewhat feel lied to as well? Did you have this dissonance of, this is amazing, but I've not been shown this, and was there a bit of anger in that, I suppose?
Yeah, positive anger, because I'd done well with the education system and I'd enjoyed school to a certain extent, but I realised looking back, and I'm glad you talked about the lie, because I'd forgotten that I used to talk about this to teachers, about the what I call the great educational lie. And the great educational lie is do well at school, you'll get a good job.
Yeah.
And when we pushed that right from the start, you have to do well at school because you get a good job, and then you realise, one, you might get a good job, but it might not be the job you want.
Quite
doing
an
well at
arbitrary
school.
word, good, isn't it?
Yeah,
A good job.
yeah, good job is well pays the mortgage and
Bit subjective.
Yeah, but it also implies if you don't do well at school, you won't get a good job, and that's a lie as well. But if we're giving that message out all the time, do well at school, you'll get a good job. And there's one at the moment going around about it's your one chance, it's your golden ticket. If you don't do well at school, that's the rest of your life over. And so we're sending kids out of mainstream education who perhaps didn't do particularly well, with the belief that that's it, you've had your chance, game over. Yeah, and the system is such, the way the education system is designed and the exam system is designed, is to have winners, you've got to have losers. So you've got what's called this norm referenced exam system, and you might get a certain number of points one year, which gets you a B grade, and the following year, because of how other people have done, that same number of points and the same response and that same expression of your academic intelligence might get you a D grade.
Yeah, because if everyone's an A, it just makes it redundant.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
well, what's the point
You've
of
got
that
to
system?
It's like league tables in the school system. Everybody, if you've got people at the top, you've also got people at the bottom.
Yes.
But why would we want schools at the bottom? Why would we want people to feel that they haven't succeeded at school? Why can't we create a system that isn't based on competition and winners and losers and threats? And why can't we just want everybody to succeed? But the model, this sort of neoliberal model, is about markets and competition, and that the best way to get the best out of people is to pit them up against each other. And it's not. That we can be collaborative and want everybody to do well, including the school down the road. Yeah.
So those ideas that you were just speaking of then, was that somewhat why you didn't want to go into teaching, because you felt that at the time and that's how it was too?
No, it was just because I just didn't have a lot of sort of belief in teachers and teaching. It just seemed not something that I wanted to be not a tribe that I wanted to be part of, I suppose. That was how I felt back then, because I hadn't, apart from being on the receiving end, I hadn't actually looked into it properly. Okay,
so where did you start to feel the reveal of, which rhymes, of league tables and competition? Was it quite early on into your career as a teacher?
Well, they came, if I started teaching in 1991, 92, something like that, I think. That was sort of early days of that sort of stuff, and Ofsted was just sort of coming in. So it was just sort of starting this neoliberal takeover of education in that way. So it's what I have seen over the 30 years is its pernicious effect in terms of demoralising so many teachers. We've got so many teachers leaving the profession, so many head teachers leaving the profession, so many teachers and head teachers who are unwell by staying, who feel a lot better once they've left. We've got issues getting people into the profession because the perception of how it is. And you just and so many unhappy kids within this system as well, and you could just see us sliding in this direction over the years, which is why for independent thinking, and I still haven't answered your question, by the way, where independent thinking came from. But this phrase we've had as independent thinking's sort of leitmotif over the years is there is another way. So we're not there to argue with people. We're not there to have a Twitter spat, although we've done a few inadvertently.
Was it by you?
Sorry about that. Yeah. But it's this idea that for everybody that says education must be like this, or the education system must be like this, or teaching must be like this, or behaviour must be like this. There's another school down the road, or another country. We'll come to my country travels as well if you like later. But there's another country doing it differently, or there's another education system working differently. So don't tell me this is the only way of doing it. It's a Margaret Thatcher thing, Tina. There is no alternative. It's this idea that the markets is the only way of doing things. The way we organise the world is the only way, and it's not. There are other ways, and there always have been other ways, and there always will be other ways. This is just the one we've got at the moment for whatever convergence of reasons that leads us down this way. So there is always another way. Is what we come back to over and over again.
We're done. That is all you need to know, guys.
If I could drop this microphone, I would. All I can do is flick it about on a spring.
That's a new one. You leave that where it is. So, did you go in to teach French first? Because you said you didn't want, that wasn't what you wanted.
Yeah, I had a French degree, and my mother-in-law at the time, who was no great fan of academia or having a degree for no reason, it was like, well, you're not a doctor, you're not a plumber, you're no good for nothing. You've not got a trade. Get a trade, man. She was from Corby.
Yeah.
in Northamptonshire. Anybody in Corby will get that joke. So it's like, well, okay, well, I've got a French degree, and I don't want to be a teacher, but okay, well, let's see, let's use the French degree. And at the time, there was a shortage of French teachers, still is, shortage of male French teachers, shortage of young male French teachers, if you like. And I think there was a bit of extra money involved in it to train as a French teacher. So I was living up in Newcastle. We were living up near Newcastle at the time, and I sort of came down, and I went to Leicester University and trained. Did my PGCE at Leicester, and then got this job in Northampton from there. So it allowed me to use the degree that I had and my ability in French to earn some money to pay the mortgage, but also then to move my career a little step forward. And I didn't teach for that long. That's why I can't be too critical of the organisation that sort of pushes teachers forward to say, yeah, do teach for a couple of years and then you can sort of take over the world. Because I only taught for a couple of years, but it was while I was teaching that independent thinking came about, the opportunity for independent thinking came about, which is why I then sort of took that step. So
what was the atmosphere in your class? Are you talking about left and right brain? Were you that sort of teacher that tried to have a very creative classroom and lots of discussion just getting the vibe of what you were hearing in your students and what their feelings were? If you notice the ones that put themselves already out of the classroom, just having fun, just smiling, not shouting, refuse to shout. I remember in my PGCE, one of my placements, this guy shouting at the top of his voice at this kid going into assembly. Oh, mate, you took me somewhere.
And it was like, right. And I'm thinking, I remember thinking to myself then, why do teachers shout at children? Because they can.
You always have that very curious mind. Any situation you're in, or you just consider like introspective and just thinking about it.
Why is that like that? How is that like that?
Awesome.
What's that for? That's which is to be in education and to be curious is the two go together nicely. Which is why, if not French teaching, but at least the world of education, I suppose, has sort of suited my brain. Of always parents, my family always used to say to me, "Oh, you think too much," and I don't think you can think too much.
And not to just hammer education, but do you feel that's where the lack is as well? What you experience is the lack of creativity, lack of thinking. Is there another way?
It's become that way because of the prescriptive nature. I mean, there's always the national curriculum. There's always that pressure. Sense of you have to cover the national curriculum. You've got all these folders to do. You've got so much pressure. You've got so little time. There's always been those constraints, but within that, there's always been that sense of creativity of being able. Because creativity works best within constraints. You don't need a blank sheet to be creative. You need restrictions and guidelines in order to be really creative.
Our mutual friend Martin Illingworth, he does a cool activity where he gets loads of words on a page and then you just got to jumble them around and make poems out of them. But it's nice to actually, as a young person, I've really feared writing, but then to actually have words already there for me to play with, it just diffuses that a little bit.
It's nice. I've got a fridge like that, with the Shakespeare magnet words and everything. You just rearrange your bits of Shakespeare on the fridge every now and again. So you've got a constraint, but within that, there's a marketing company produced a book called ABC, A Beautiful Constraint, just showing how to be truly creative, this from a marketing point of view, but when you've got no money or no time or no audience or a dodgy product or whatever. So the constraint is good. So there was always that within education. You had to cover the curriculum. But what's happened is, but what I was able to do was we did drama, we did poetry. This is all in French, drama, poetry. We put the tables to one side. We sort of enjoyed ourselves as much as we could, and for me, for some of the kids, for the kids who were like the top set, because it was setted there, and there's evidence that says setting kids by ability isn't the best way of doing things, but it's controversial. But there is evidence that says everybody does better if they're all mixed up. But we were setted, and what I realised again, curiosity was like, oh, okay, well actually, you could set by postcode. You could work out. You could just if you worked out the town. And which end of town was which, and then those kids will go in the bottom set and those kids will go in the top set. It was pretty effective postcode setting, really, even though they called it by ability. but my job for the top set was if I just sort of make sure I didn't spoil anything, so they'd get their A grades, and that seemed to work out. And for the bottom sets, and the middle ones, it was let's try and get them to that magical C grade, and we sort of did that a bit. But with the bottom sets, for me, it was they're not going to do well in French. They're not going to enjoy French. There's no point of learning French. They're in the middle of Northampton. They haven't even been to Corby, let alone anywhere else.
You're into Corby in this podcast.
But Rushton, then let's change it. Milton Keynes. But if I just hammered them all the time for not learning French properly, they were just going to walk out feeling angry, cross,
Worthless.
annoyed, worthless. All that. So I just wanted them to walk out feeling better about themselves when they walked in, somehow or other.
Mate.
That was the most important bit for me, rather than a short-term goal of getting them to fail a French GCSE. It was a longer-term goal of actually they could actually enjoy being in the classroom and could feel safe and secure. I didn't know I was thinking about safety and security at that point, but it was just that it was somewhere where somebody smiled at them and they had a bit of fun, and we worked. It wasn't doing nothing. We still did the work, but in a positive way.
I was just thinking, as a teacher, going into a school and the head teacher saying, just make them feel safe, make them feel happy, better than they came into the classroom, leave them out feeling better than that. And it's like, oh, that really takes all the pressure off.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful feeling. As you said it, I literally smiled, and it was like, oh, that's lovely.
But you're still doing the job. You're still, you know, we're not just messing about and feeling good. It was still doing the French, but we're just, the priority for those kids was that I didn't turn them off learning for the rest of their lives. And that was what the danger was, that they were going to be turned off learning. Like I was turned off history, let's say, for example. I was taught in a direct transmission. It wasn't called that at the time. It was just old-fashioned, where a lady would sit at the front and dictate, and we would just have to copy for 50 minutes, and then we'd get a test. And that was direct transmission teaching from the 1980s. And I got a C grade in history, but I didn't enjoy it and I didn't like it, and I didn't go back to history, and it didn't come alive for me. Because then you think we're back to the grades. You know, I'd rather have. I think there's two things here. I'd rather have a low grade and a love of a subject, than a high grade and never want to do the subject ever again. It's like when my dad was. One of the reasons I think why he was against school, he went to the grammar school, same school I went to in Leicestershire. And he was taught Shakespeare to a metronome. Dum, dum, dum. That was the iambic pentameter. That was how he did it, and it just turned him off. And he did okay, but it turned him off Shakespeare forever. He just never wanted to go near a play, even the ones I was in.
Got a lot of people in music that do production and stuff. They all say, I can't listen to music anymore. They've just been too thorough with it.
It just kills. I don't want to kill anything in a child. I want to bring it to life. And if it's a question of getting a C grade and a love for it rather than A grade because I've drilled them, then I'd rather go for the C grade and leave the door open. And that also then resonates with the second thing on grades that I noticed with my son. He's now 34 this year, but when he was doing his GCSEs, and I was looking at his work and his ability and his potential, and I realised he could probably get A grades. And then I think, well, for what point? For what purpose? And it would make me feel good. Oh, my son's got A grades. The teachers would be very happy. Oh, he's got A grades. Oh, I've got A grades through this, vicariously through this child. But for him, it meant he had no friends.
Yeah.
He didn't want A grades. So the deal I did with him for his GCSEs was, we called it the B-boy strategy. So B grades and a life.
Wow.
You can have your life, have your friends, do your messing around, do all that sort of stuff that you want to do at 15, 16, and just pass. It'll be okay. I mean, he got an A star in his chemistry coursework, so I grounded him for a week for that. And I talked about that to teachers. And I remember being in a school doing an inset day in a school in Devon, and I was getting a bit of a grilling from the teachers because I was, you're just encouraging underachievement. Everybody should aim for the best possible grade. You're just, encouraging him to not try very hard. And the teacher came up to me at the break. She hadn't been brave enough to raise her hand in front of her colleagues, but she came up in the break. She said, "Look, I get what you're saying." So when I was 16, I just worked really, really hard to get those A grades. I had no life. I just worked really hard to get those A grades. And she says, I'll never be 16 again.
Wow.
She missed out on being a 16-year-old girl because of the great educational lie. Do well at school, you'll get a good job. The better your grades, the better the job you'll get. And it's there's more to it than that. I'm not saying don't. I mean, there's a phrase I used to share. It's a Bill Gates quote I think used to share with kids. Get the best education you can and keep on learning. And so I'm all for that, all for education, all for learning. But there's also that question that we need to ask, which is at what cost? At what cost to my love of understanding the history of society did my C grade in history come, or my dad's Shakespeare lessons, or any of it really? At what cost? And then as over these 30 years, as things in England have become stricter in terms of direct transmission and behaviour and behaviourist policies and cognitive science that treats children in a very mechanistic sort of way, and then we're looking at how many kids are unhappy, how many kids are queuing to be treated by the mental health authorities, and how overworked they are, and how many kids are out of school, like the ones who come to you here in this amazing
Thank you.
bus collection you've got here, this nest of buses that you have here. And my daughter, my youngest, Phoebe, who we were talking about before, works for a company called Nudge Education, and they're working around the country trying to save kids who have been kicked out of school, trying to rescue children from what they call chronic disengagement, this thing that's just where it's become so irrelevant and so just purposeless for so many children. And it doesn't have to be that way, and there always will be schools that are doing it brilliantly.
Yes.
But it's like they're swimming against the tide. But a lot of independent thinking, and we still haven't got to.
We're getting to get, mate.
And a lot of independent thinking's work has been
minutes.
it's sort of permission and reassurance for the schools that are doing it differently, that are coming at things in a slightly different way, but who feel a little bit out on a limb, a little bit exposed. It's saying, no, you're okay. Here's the other school that's doing it. Here's another country that's doing it. Here's the neuroscience that backs up what you're doing. It's okay. I talked for quite a while about two things that will transform education, which was brave heads and lazy teachers. And the lazy teachers was about trying to get the kids to work harder than the teachers.
Yeah.
But the direct transmission, teacher's the most important person in the room, sort of stuff has taken over a little bit. But it'll come back again, because we do want kids working harder than the teachers. It doesn't have to be the teacher doing all the work all the time. And lazy teaching, Jim Smith was an associate, or is an associate. His book, The Lazy Teacher's Handbook, it sold really well, because it was full of practical ideas that actually saved teachers time, saved their marriages, saved their health, and got kids the right sorts of grades because the teachers did the work. So
what sort of protocols was in that? Because that sounds really interesting.
Well, it was just you're looking at a lesson plan and thinking how little can I contribute?
Yeah.
How
what stimulus could I put in?
What can I not do that they can do?
Yes.
So that they get better results, and it frees me up. The lazy teaching, not to sit on my backside and read The Guardian, but to focus then on the kids who really need me. There's a Dutch educational academic called Biester, Biesta, controversial because of his comments are dismissed by certain members of the education community in England. But I think he's brilliant. His book, The Beautiful Risk of Education, is just one of the best education books I've ever read. And he talks about the gift of teaching. He said we don't want teachers to be on the sidelines. We don't want facilitating. Facilitating, it comes from the French facile or the Latin and facilidad in Spanish. It means to make easy. But if you make stuff easy, kids don't learn it. It doesn't go in. Stuff needs to be hard. It needs to be properly difficult in order for us to be motivated to want to do something. So, and he says the gift of teaching is that you bring to the classroom that thing that no one else has got, that combination of your experience, your knowledge, your professional knowledge, your knowledge of the community, your knowledge of the subject, your knowledge of the children in front of you, your passions, who you are as a person, and you bring that to bear in the classroom. That's the gift of teaching, which if you're doing your lazy teaching, which means, I don't know, taking the register, marking the books, feedback, so much stuff that the kids can do and benefit for themselves by doing it. It frees you up to do the thing that only you can do as a professional in the classroom. So the beautiful risk of education is called that because this idea that education is a straight line, that if I teach you and then you get it in your brain through enough repetition, and then I test you and then we can move on. But he says real education, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't make stuff go on in other people's heads necessarily. So there's always going to be this risk, but that's part of it. So there's that constant sense of creativity and creation of, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try this, as opposed to direct transmission from a script. If I do this, if I press that button, this learning will come out, which is this mechanistic behaviorist sort of approach that we've trundled down for a while now. But pendulums swing and we go around and things will change.
Another educational lie I think I was sold at school, it was do well here, get a good job, but it was also do well here so you can get out of here. That was a big one. It's a bit of a different conversation there, but I remember that was really ingrained in us, was get out of this community. You'll find your way into London, or you can find your way doing this, and I think that was a lie.
I mean, the social mobility thing is an interesting one. Social mobility is one of these things that it's the things we think without thinking. It's like, get the best possible grades. You don't even think about that. You just assume that that's a good thing. Or, social mobility has got to be a good thing. And when we did the book, The Working Class, few years ago, which had about 45 different contributors, all trying to change the narrative around the feckless poor, and it's all their own fault, and they just need to work hard, and things will be better.
Pull yourself up by your
pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And you haven't got any boots, as they say. And one of our associates, real David Cameron, Scottish guy, he was talking. He did a chapter on social mobility, and it really, again, it changed my perspective, because social mobility, the subtext there is basically saying where you live is a shithole, and if you work really hard, you can leave it.
Yeah.
Which is also saying your family, your community, your tribe, your people, everything you grew up with, they're rubbish. You need to walk away.
Wow.
And why? And you know, we did a conference around the working class up in Manchester. Andy Burnham came and spoke, and we had local young people had set up a charity in the area. And they were saying, you know, we don't want to live. We like living where we live. And some suburb, you know, these suburbs in Manchester. Can we just make it a bit better? Which is a bit like you've done here. You know, you haven't moved. You haven't gone to London to. No. You know, you've just thought, okay, well, there's some gaps in there.
What's funny
what's needed here? Let's do something about it.
That the reason of that is because of London. Because I met a guy as well, Mr. G, who's a poet, awesome. And I remember going to London and just doing a recital, and it was a great event. But then afterwards we'd have a drink, and I was just talking quite negatively about home and where I was from and my background. And he sort of just said, "Well, whose fault's that?"
Yeah.
And I was like, and he said, "If there's not a scene, make a scene."
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, dude, that's real. Yeah. Well, I don't have to. It's lovely to go and meet people all over, and we'll get to your travel as well. But there was something in that where I thought, oh yeah, it's just the philosophy we've been grown up with, and we've all just ushered out our mouths. It can change.
Social mobility is, and we have a social mobility, or we did have a SAR, and there's all this sort of talk about, and I'm not saying people shouldn't leave, but I'm saying let's have a choice. Let's make everywhere better, rather than.
It doesn't have to be an avoidance. It's like you can leave out of choice, but not to get away and save yourself.
Yeah, and we're saying those who are, you know, with ambition, with drive, with academic success, they don't belong here. So what's left?
Oh, mate.
So
good question.
Yeah, and then you get these communities where, you know, where the hope has gone, if you like. So I'm all for being the nail at the bottom of the marble. The pipe, if you like.
Is that a book name?
Yeah. It could be. Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Very abstract, but beautiful.
But it sums it up. You know, imagine sending these marbles down, and with the nail, everything just goes in the same direction without thinking, even without the constraints. It's like the elephants. When elephants are little, supposedly, or this is allegorical, I don't know, but supposedly when they're little, you chain the elephant to the stake with a chain around its ankle, and it tries to pull away and it can't. And then as it gets bigger, they just take the chain away. They take the stake away, but keep the chain on the ankle. So the elephant has spent a long time trying to escape, but it can't. And now it just thinks, well, I can't escape. I can't do anything different because of the chain on the ankle, even though it's not actually attached to anything.
Interesting, yeah.
So that's in many ways.
I hope that's not real. So I hope it is allegorical. I said that word lovely.
Allegorical. Rhyme allegorical.
Yeah.
I think there was a book called Teaching Elephants to Dance. I think that's where I first came across that idea. But these constraints. The what?
Crabs in the bucket.
Yeah, or there's fleas as well, isn't there? With the glass.
Yeah,
with the glass.
Bang the heads.
It's this sort of thing. It's you know, if I can do this, what else can I do? It's that sudden realization that the constraints you thought you had don't exist.
What happened to you in that epiphany moment?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, actually, I'm not hampered by anything at all, and it's just a huge realization. Yeah. And I took that back to my wife, who was a nurse, and who hadn't been to university, who was not an academic in certain ways, but had gone to do the nursing training and was a qualified nurse. And I talked about this stuff as in epiphany terms, and her view was like, well, yeah, of course. So she hadn't had the constraints on her of doing well at school. She'd just gone on with her life.
Right, yeah.
So I thought that was interesting as well. It's like, yeah, of course you can do what you like.
I've overthought this.
Yeah, what's your problem? Yeah. Don't be thinking too much.
I've been there really summing this all up. It was in there all the time.
I'm glad you caught up now. Come on.
That's my life story, man. Okay, so you're in this classroom, your French classroom.
Yeah.
You're allowed to sort of make it exciting and creative, and you're having fun.
Yeah, can move the tables around.
Mate, that's the big one.
Yeah.
literally position them anywhere I want.
Yeah.
Yes.
Put them in a horseshoe, push them out to one side and
I
make a
think
big
circular,
space.
that was my favourite. Horseshoe or just all in a circle
Yeah.
was my favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a stage.
It's a sackable offence in some schools now, I should imagine.
So, and you're having these curious conversations with your own introspection and head and other people.
Yeah.
You said there was an ITL moment.
Yeah.
That this gave opportunity for an ITL moment. What was that moment?
When you do stuff happens.
Love it, yeah.
Oh, and Goethe said,
and Gilbert.
Well, yeah, do shit happens. Goethe says, "What you can do or think you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin now or do it now." Something like that. So this, just by putting stuff like you found here, by putting stuff into the universe, by taking steps, by doing things, you suddenly start to cause these ripples. And you also, and this is one of the things the guy in Durham was talking about those years ago, these laws of the universe, the law of attraction, that you will attract towards you the people who are sort of in keeping with your goals and your beliefs and your values and your resonances. Again, as you found here, we were talking about
people understand that now through like The Secret, because that was made popularized on Netflix, wasn't it?
Okay, I
think so. Yeah, there was a book called The Secret and so on. Again, I think it's a wonderful, beautiful principle. But something that, again, people can see money behind anything, and then they can get it, coin it, and turn it into a pyramid scheme, which I think the guy did. So then it convolutes a real cool idea and thought.
Yeah, just an idea that's been around for a long time.
Yes.
That we're energy, human beings, we're vibrations, and if we vibrate in harmony with other people, and we vibrate with trees as well.
Yes.
A naturalist was once telling me that they vibrate at a similar level to humans, which is why just walking in the forest bathing, I don't know what it's called in Japanese now, but the idea of just going into the woods just calms us down because of the resonances. So, but anyway, so I was French teaching, but I was also doing Blueprint for Success, I think I called it, sort of my version of this stuff, doing it for sixth formers in the school, also running it for schools across Northampton. And one of the teachers, just a colleague in the staff room, it turned out, and she was into it, and she was into Tony Robbins, and liked what I was doing. And her husband, it turned out, had some money to invest. He'd sold his engineering business, and they did quite well out of it. So what transpired leading up to the 4th of May 30 years ago was a conversation where we agreed to set up a company that they were going to put £20,000 towards to allow me to sort of sidestep from the full-time teaching in order to go in to work with young people in schools on all this sort of success motivation.
And that was
stuff.
just you at the time?
Yeah. So you have that, and I think Tony Robbins talks about it as the rocking chair conversation or scenario. But there's also like the deathbed scenario. When you imagine you sort of now into your final days, and you look back, are there any decisions that you wish you will have taken, regardless of how it might have worked out or not? Are there any decisions that you will regret having turned down? And for me, this was one number. I don't no idea what's going to happen. We've got one child who was 4 or 5, another one on the way. But will I regret saying no to this opportunity? And talking it through with my wife at the time, it was like, no, we have to take this opportunity. Don't know what's going to happen, but we have to sort of take this step into the dark. So I took their money, left school. I was still doing supply teaching, but also did some work because of my writing. Did some work for the local council, doing some sort of PR work for them. So I just juggled various things to keep the money coming, so I didn't tap into the 20,000 too quickly.
Was there reluctance to leave teaching because you were having quite a good time, it seemed?
No, because I got into teaching to do exactly this. So
yes,
it was French teaching was the stepping stone. And I know I could fall back to it now if I wanted to.
Do you want to? You can come here and do some sessions. Don't worry about that. Yeah,
teaching French to kids who don't want to learn French.
No.
We're all reluctant. To French teachers out there, I do love French and French teaching, and being able to speak French is just a marvellous skill to have. So I'm all for it, but it's I'll let other people who are better at it than I am to do it. But no, I'd gone into teaching to do it became a stepping stone. I hadn't known how it was going to work out, but like I say, you just do stuff and stuff happens.
Your intention was out there.
Yeah. You just make clear what your intentions are, and then magic happens. Like you found here, we're going from an idea of a bus to a car park, a bus park full of buses.
That was
but
the
also
big stepping stone.
but the people that you've attracted towards you, and it's not all. Sometimes you get a distance. Distance is okay as well. You don't want groupthink. You don't want everybody to be exactly the same. But sometimes the distance is too much, and you go your separate ways. That's how independent thinking has grown as well. I employed.
Let's talk of the magic.
I employed a couple of people. At one point, I employed 3 people, I think, and I didn't enjoy it then. And you end up, they were good people, but you end up with all their problems as well as your own, if you like. So it was like, no, that's not what I want to do. So, and I can't remember where the idea came from, who put it to me. The idea of sort of working a bit like a solicitor. You have partners, you have associates.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay. And then I was starting to just by my work, a lot of it in Northamptonshire, but around the world, around the country as well. I was starting to sort of just meet interesting people. And those conversations then led to, well, maybe you could sort of come and do some stuff with independent thinking. And that's how it grew.
Was it at conferences or well, how were you meeting these awesome people?
Some of it was conferences. I mean, some people, when you go and speak to a load of teachers or head teachers at a conference or in an inset, people will always come up to you and say, oh, I'd like to do what you do. And then you have to work out quite quickly, are they moving towards or moving away? And for me, you always have to be moving towards. If they want to do what I do because they don't like teaching and they just want to do anything but, that's not the right thing. But if they're like I was always moving towards something, then it's worth having the conversation. So I'd give them my card. It was all in days before internet. I was so excited when I got my first fax machine. It's like a proper company. But you give them a card, so you just get in touch. And what you want to know is what you're going to bring to the party. What have you got that the world needs, that independent thinking can help exploit in a positive way?
Did you meet some charlatans on the way too?
Well, a lot of people you give the card to and they never get back to you.
Yeah.
So it was just a little flash of the pan thing. Some people do, and you realise they're not exactly... They're a sandwich short of a full picnic, let's say.
Oh, mate.
Can I say that?
Lovely, mate. Yeah, you just did.
The correct terms.
It's not getting edited.
we used to have a page on the website saying, "Are you a nutter?" Because it was, and I don't mean in a psychiatric way. I just mean a psychological way. I just mean they're just a bit odd, and we like odd. Odd's good, but not that odd. Not
talking to your feet.
Yeah, not that odd. But so it's a fine line trying to find the people who are oddities because they don't fit in, but in a good way, because they can see there's another way, because they want to do something differently, because they have a belief and a passion and follow it, which many people don't. So it's attracting those sorts of people, and there's now 40, nearly 50 different associates.
Can you articulate anything other than odd? Is there what you're looking for in a package in somebody?
Well, it's become a cliche now, but the X factor thing, it's that sense of there being more to them than sort of meets the eye, that they've got something to offer, because we're a business, so that you need to offer a product that somebody wants and will pay money for. So they've got something to give, but the way that they do it is not just generic. It's not just derivative. It's not just I've read a book, so I'm going to talk about
I get you.
how to learn. Or I've read some research by some guy and I've written a book. I've just recreated stuff from.
Because that really did happen in the Tony Robbins era, I think. A lot of people were very inspired by it and then just wanted to go and reclaim it.
I'll be like Tony Robbins light sort of thing. So,
yeah.
And Tony Robbins was great. I did the firewalk. That was one of the first things I spent my 20 grand on.
Oh, really?
Doing the firewalk in London. And it was.
You met
it was
him then?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It was a good thing to do, and I was able to talk about it with kids, talk about doing the firewalk as a way of overcoming your fears. There's nothing magical about it.
Painful?
No,
bro.
No.
Okay.
No, as long
so
as you
it's
get
a state of mind.
Yeah, it's about overcoming your fears and the limitations, and as long as you get you get your hose down, because the burns are going to come, because you go travelling so fast. You're not running over it, but you're travelling determinedly over these hot coals, and there are incidents I know with it. So he's well insured, I'm sure.
Oh, mate.
But also there's like a hose at the end, so because if you've got little bits of hot coal between your toes, that's when it can burn you. So you come up here, but it's. You get yourself in the right state of mind. This was about 2:00 in the morning at the Alexandra Palace car park by the time we got there, because everything was running late. It was in the dark. There was like drum music playing out from some back of there was people carrying wheelbarrows full of hot coals. There's I don't know how many thousand of us there were. Just lots of queues. And you have to say things like cool moss is what you say as you walk over, because what you say is, the language that you use determines the reality that you end up with. So by saying cool moss, you're telling your brain this is what I'm going to experience. Cool moss.
And you have to say it in a certain way.
Probably in a way that made you believe it.
Yes.
Not in a cool moss.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of NLP, which has been roundly dissed by, again, certain portions of the education system,
Neurolinguistic
neurolinguistic programming. But I've learned so much from it. Some of it is not so much, but I have learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
And it grew out of, my understanding of it is it grew out of hypnosis. And hypnosis is about the language we use on ourselves and how it works. So that we have this subconscious response to words, which people like Tom Peters, the business guru, he talks about that. We have this subconscious response to words. So, we need to choose our words carefully. And this is what helps you to be curious as well. When you realize that the language we use, it's a bit like the feckless paw and the social mobility. The language we use determines our reality. Therefore, we need to be careful about the language that we're using on ourselves, and also the language that others use on us, especially around the news, around the media. If you look at
what you're putting yourself subject to.
Well, yeah, if you look at the language that's being used, if you say, 5,000 children have died as a result of this, in this war, let's say, mentioning no wars, or you say 5,000 children have been killed. Now, you might not consciously notice the difference between that, but that's a choice that somebody has made for a reason. And we need to, if education, one of the things education can do is really help young people interrogate their news sources in a world of fake news, in a world of bias, to really understand how they're being manipulated, even unconsciously by the people who wrote it.
Any other good examples for self-taught that is quite an obvious example?
Yeah,
people...
I mean, you can use it for yourself, but I use it with teachers. If I say to one child, when you go to university, you'll need this stuff, so pay attention. And then I say to the other child, if you go to university, you'll need this stuff, so pay attention. What's the difference when and if?
Wow.
So there's a tiny little thing, and you might not even notice that it's happened, but it has happened.
Yeah. So,
and Freud allegedly says we bleed our beliefs through every pore. So how you look at the kids as they walk through the door, how the look on your face, the way you talk to them, the tone of voice you use, all of those sorts of things. You smile at some kids as they walk through the door and not others. Again, it's something I've talked to teachers about for years, the power of the smile. That, one teacher was telling me about her least favourite group. What could you do? I said, well, pretend they're your favourite group. And she said, within 4 or 5 weeks, she turned them around. She smiled when they walked through the door. She said, I'm pleased to see you. Thank you for coming. I enjoyed teaching. All these lies. But
it's that energy as well, though.
But it just changes everything. If I say you're my favourite group ever, you might not believe it, but part of your brain then starts to believe it because you've said it, and we have that response. And
fake it till you make it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You were talking about vibration there, and you can imagine subconsciously, you don't know, when you go to a room ready for war, you're going to bring this very strange vibration to it, even when you're trying to be nice. So just training your brain to calm itself a little bit. Let's really enjoy this classroom. Let's enjoy these people in front of me. It's a totally different vibration.
Yeah, and they pick up those vibrations just by walking through the door. They know when you are
faking it. Totally.
Well, but they know when they don't like you.
Yes.
And even if you say you're my favourite group and make a joke of it, and they know you're not, it's still a joke. It's still a laugh. So you've eased the pressure on the scared brain or the angry brain, the reptilian brain, to that it's okay. We're going to have a laugh in this. It's not all about fear and pressure and coercion and control. And
well, I do love your motto. There's always another way. Because that is it. It's training yourself to think this isn't working. Then you just see so many people headbutt walls and just keep going. Well, it should be like this. Like, there may be another innovative way of doing this and handling this situation. So that's beautiful. I
remember an interview with a comedian, his name will come back to me, and he was, they was asking him, have you ever bombed in, when you'd been doing your stand-up? And he was, oh yeah, of course we all have. And they said, well, what's that like? And he said, well, I just get curious. He said, I just think, well, why aren't you laughing at that? The last group, they laughed at that. Why aren't you laughing at that? And I sort of kept that with me, even at times where you're having a really bad keynote or an inset or whatever. So rather than taking it, but I mean, it's not nice. It happens every now and again, which is why we have a money back guarantee with independent thinking we have for 30 years. If they didn't perform.
No one's used that on me yet.
No, it's good. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but it sort of reassures the client that we'll take the risk, not you.
Awesome.
But just when you do have an odd turn, if you like, that you're able just to look at it from a position of curiosity.
Have you had some bombs?
I can think of two.
And what was your curiosity saying?
Oh, it was horrible. But you're able to look back curiously afterwards and just say, I can see why that was, and I can see. And then the money back guarantee. I remember I did an event up in Cumbria, and I have two events in Cumbria, and I vowed never to go back. But I have been back, and it's been okay since. But I did an event, and it was January the 2nd, which is not good for anybody.
No.
Which also means you're leaving your family. I was living in Suffolk at the time on January the 1st, and we'd had an interesting Christmas. Something else we might come to. And I did my stuff, and we sent them the bill, and they paid half of it, and they said it was okay, but it wasn't quite what we wanted, and they sent the cheque for half the amount. So I just sent the cheque back. I said, no, it's all or nothing, and they sent it back. I said, no, yeah, have the half, and I just pinned it on a wall, and I've never cashed it since. So yeah, there was a sort of a learning experience there, and also just to make sure you are surprising the client. If all you're doing is reassuring them that they're right, there's a place for that. But if that's all you're doing, then you're not really doing enough. You need to surprise them and throw things at them that they weren't expecting, or in a way that they weren't expecting, or just some sideways views on things.
And you feel that client, they had this high expectation, they just wanted you to utter what they were thinking?
Well, no, I think I did utter what they were thinking. I think they wanted something beyond that. It was like, where do we go to the next level? I think that's what it was. So I should have done more homework with them beforehand.
Interesting, that's cool.
But like I say, 2nd of January is not
Great.
in Cumbria from Suffolk. It's a long way
It's
to
like
go.
the
to.
after dinner slot, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't do them anymore either. So.
And my reflection, I always do an hour 20 and then have a break and then an hour. I never do like an hour, then an hour 20 or something. So it's shorter at the end.
Yeah.
I think that helps.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah.
So, okay, we're building up this ITL journey.
Yep.
An interesting one for me. When did the thunks come into this? Because I've watched on YouTube. This is old school.
Yeah.
But a video of you sat in a room with lots of young people doing some thunk questions and stuff.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, what?
One of the first contracts that I got in Northampton, right early on, was going into schools across Northamptonshire and talking about philosophy for children, P4C. There's another bit of the story. Apart from the motivational stuff at the business school in Durham, I'd also seen a programme on BBC called The Transformers, and it was a series of 3 programmes about educational people who transformed the world of education. There was Butterflies was one, Feuerstein I think was another one, and a Jewish guy, and then they were talking about philosophy for children, P4C. And they had a school, sort of leafy suburb school in the Hamptons or somewhere, posh sort of 4 or 5 year olds doing this philosophy for children stuff. And it developed by a guy called Matthew Lipman, who was a philosophy professor in America, who realised that his philosophy graduates could tell him what Descartes thought, but couldn't think for themselves. And maybe we needed to get children thinking for themselves in the education system. So we put this programme together. And then also they would then, on the television programme, they were doing P4C in Newark, I think, which is sort of wrong side of the tracks part of New York, I think. But anyway, it was sort of black kids going to school past crime, past drugs, past violence, past hopelessness to get to school. And this young teacher, a young white teacher, in the class of a older black lady with predominantly black kids, trying to do this P4C, trying to get this thing off the ground. And you could see to begin with, he was really struggling. And then there was a girl there, and it was like she suddenly realised that it didn't have to be that way, that she was capable of more than what her background was implying she was capable of. And then she said, I want to be a lawyer. And it was, so it's a similar sort of epiphany moment, but come at it in a different way, not in a sort of motivational, you can do this, goal set, what do you want to, sort of Tony Robbins sort of way, but in a more pensive thinking, using your thoughts to change your reality by questioning it more deeply, which is philosophy is sort of where that comes from. So, and I remember thinking then, and I was working at Hartlepool at the time.
Is if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Oh, there you go. Yes, that's nice. Yeah, you can, I like that. I like to know that one.
Pocket that.
Yeah. And I think I was working at Hartlepool at the time, and it was like, if I ever went into teaching, which I don't, but if I ever went in to be a teacher, then I would do P4C, and so that's a part of the jigsaw. I'd forgotten that. So, right in my NQT as it was ECT now, that my newly qualified teacher year, I was running P4C lessons with the kids. So that was another part of what we're doing. So it wasn't just the motivational stuff and the mind mapping and the learning stuff. I was also doing P4C.
Wow.
And then this project, then when I set up ITF, Independent Thinking, and I was asked to then work in schools across Northamptonshire, and a part of it, apart from looking at things like multiple intelligence, but part of it was also to try and sort of launch P4C into schools. Now, being a lazy teacher, I had the choice. It was like, okay, I've got a school tomorrow. I've got to go in. I've got 2 schools. I've got to go in. I've got to work with, year 4, year 5, year 6 in the library, 30 kids each time. Now, the proper P4C way involves having a resource, photocopying, preparing. And being a lazy teacher, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. So what happened, and I can't remember where it first happened or even where the name came from, but what emerged from that laziness and that creativity was the idea of just sort of on the way there coming up with a question that I could then throw into kids to begin with to get them thinking.
Can you remember some of the first questions that you were running around with?
Yeah, I mean, things like, can you touch the wind? I think that was an early one. Or the one, if you go into a shop and read a newspaper without paying, is it stealing? That was an early one. Is a broken down car parked? That was an early one.
Okay.
Is there more future than past? Was an early one.
And because young people had been in a system that was very linear, and here's a question, what's the answer?
Yeah.
Did you feel it was difficult?
Yeah.
Were you? I don't know. Was often a response?
Yeah.
I'm guessing you got. Or
so there's a number of things there. So the ones who struggled most and still do with questions without answers or with multiple answers, because the answer to a thunk is either yes, no, yes and no, not yes nor no, or something else altogether. It's the academic kids, the ones who are used to playing the guess what's in the teacher's head game. They're the ones who struggle most. They're the ones who come up afterwards and say, well, what is the answer though, sir?
Oh, wow.
They're so frustrated by being asked a question for which they can't be made to feel good by having the right answer, because it's a totally different game. The kids who are not used to, who don't play that game or aren't used to getting the right answer, or maybe never had and this is where it was used in a big way, never had the confidence to raise their hand to come up with the answer, even though they were thinking it, they're the ones who seem to really benefit the most, more quickly from sitting in a circle and asking these odd questions. They're the ones who go, oh, my brain hurts, because it really got them thinking. And my brain hurts, for me, is a fantastic thing for a child to say in a classroom. And I don't hear them saying that. They weren't saying that in my French lessons. I don't hear them saying that they might have to think hard or learn stuff, learn patterns, learn processes in order to do well in an academic situation. But in terms of having that brain flipped around where you think the answer is this and then you think it's, well, no, maybe I thought it was this, but no, maybe it's that. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And their brain's going up and down and round and round. And it's, my brain hurts is just fantastic. That's the best bit of feedback that I get from kids. So it was those who really benefited the most from working in that P4C thunks way.
Isn't there a noise that you say? It's like the questions that make your brain go,
ouch.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, questions that make your brain go, oh, my brain hurts.
Yeah.
And I remember they were asked to be involved in some television program where basically the model was that the kids took over the school. And Jackie Beer, one of our long-term associates, who had been a teacher in one of the schools I was doing the thunks with, she's an associate, and so she was sort of leading on this. But they got me to come in and do some thunks with a group of kids. And there was a girl there, academic, high-flying, very successful. And I think I did the thunk, is there more future or past? Mm-hmm. And she was just like, well, I don't know. I said, I know you don't know. Nobody knows, but tell me what you think. And she's going, I don't know. I said, no, it's not about knowing. It's about thinking. Tell me what you think the answer might be. And she just couldn't process the question that involved thinking and not knowing. And that really helped me understand the difference. It's not all about, about the knowledge-rich society and knowledge is power and all that sort of stuff. But there's more to it than that. There's the thinking bit, which isn't necessarily about the knowledge. It's about the going backwards and forwards and flipping things over and thinking things that you don't know yet and thinking things that might be impossible to know, but I still need to think about them. Is there more love or hate in the world? Is there more pebbles or blades of grass in the world? And it's like, I don't know. I know you don't know, but just what process might you go through in order to come up with some sort of conclusion, regardless of whether it's accurate or not?
Do you also attribute it to sort of fear, maybe, like, being ridiculed for not knowing? Is that something that we've ingrained in people?
Yeah, and getting it wrong.
Yeah,
that's a big part of it. And again, you see that with the cold calling, this idea that you just sort of pick a child and get them to what's the answer, and it's the one that's it's the answer that's in your head to the question that you've thought of. And when I do thunks, and when I encourage teachers, as I have done all around the world, to sort of do this and follow it up with the P4C, I say, the starting point, I always start with some creative thinking questions, because creative thinking, and that they're different from thunks. They're not philosophical. They're just creative questions like
playful.
What would it be? I mean, is black a colour? Could be. What's the biggest colour in the world? That would be like a creative thinking question. What's the biggest colour in the? What's the biggest emotion in the world? What colour is shopping? What colour is war? They're questions where the answer. You might say, the biggest colour in the world is red, and you say, okay, why do you think red? And, because of because of the sun. And somebody else might say black, and you say, why black? Oh, because of the universe. And they're both right. They're both valid. So they're not philosophical questions. They're creative questions. But you've said the message to the group. You can't be wrong.
Yes.
And I can say you can't be wrong, but they still think I'm playing that game of guess what's in the teacher's head. I'm trying to catch them out and make them feel bad. But actually saying, look, okay, you said red, you said green, you said blue, and you're all right, so it's fine. And immediately you see them go, yeah, okay. And then you can then go into the thunks and the P4C. But sometimes the two segue together nicely. So in a school in Corby, where a lot of this work was done, it was Corby. It was a year 4 or year 5 group. And I started off with the what's the biggest colour, just to warm them up, creative limbering up and all of that. And somebody said black, and why? Oh, because of the universe, or often blue because of the sky and all that sort of stuff. And then suddenly this girl went, black's not a colour. And then suddenly this big debate ensued about colour and black and the universe and lack of colour, and was white a colour, and is black the absence of colour? And if I see a black dog, am I seeing a black dog, or am I seeing a sort of a hole in the universe, the shape of a dog, or? And then people say, oh yeah, black's a colour because it's a shade. You go, well, it's a shade of what? And then we had like half an hour from the starting point question of what's the biggest colour.
You were being a really lazy teacher.
They went for it. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. We flipped and flopped all over the place. We're trying to understand the nature of colour and science and art and race and all sorts of things in there with that question, is black a colour?
Wow.
But you can sort of go with it and allow them the joy of exploring with their minds the universe. And we've talked at the beginning about curiosity. You're then encouraging them to ask questions about everything, but in a positive way. You don't want them to not believe anything, but you want them to be able to say, well, why is that? Why has they chosen that word and not that word? Why have they chosen that colour and not that colour? Why am I here and not there? Why are you speaking to me like that? And why is everybody in my leadership team in my school white and everybody who's cleaning up the school not white? Or why is everybody who speaks that accent there and everybody who speaks my accent over there? And you start to encourage people to ask questions in order to make the world better. It's taken me 30 years to work out what the point of education is, and it's to make the world better.
And what do the naysayers say for this? I'm guessing everybody gets haters.
So a naysayer will say nay.
Yeah. Have you had that? Have you had people say this is a bunch of woo-woo nonsense?
Yeah. Which is they're allowed to say that. Yeah. They're allowed to be
frictions and tussles make it a beautiful thing as well.
What I can do though, because of
society.
The conflict is fine. What I can do though is draw on. Because I've done it for so long in so many places with so many kids all around the world, is to say, but when I was in this school doing this with this is what happened. And also a model that I quite like, I think last time I did this was in Australia, where I perhaps talk to the staff one day, and then the following day I'll go in, it'll be a proper school day, then I'll go into the classrooms across the whole school and do some things so the teachers can see what I've done. And then we might get, at the end of the day, the teachers then will sort of sit around in a circle, and I say, well, just tell me what you saw, good and bad, what you like, what you didn't like. Just reflect on what you saw me do with your kids, and that's one of the things we can all do at independent thinking, including you, is we can hold our own with a group of kids to show that what we are, that it's not just theoretical, it's not just nice stuff. It actually does work with a group of kids like yours, because they are your kids. The thunks for me, I remember a friend once was a rally driver, and when he got into a car, he made it do things. Even if it was your car, he made it do things you didn't know your car could do, because of his skill as a rally driver.
Wow.
And that's how it strikes me with the Thunks, as you go in and because teachers are going, that kid never normally speaks. Wow, that girl amazed me. She hasn't said anything for months, and wow, I didn't know that was possible. And so you just showing in a really straightforward, quite straightforward way. This is what these kids are, and this is what you're missing out on. I was asked in Singapore to go and do some with a group of girls observed by teachers in a state school in Singapore, and I was doing my research to begin with, and there's a real sense in Singapore that this idea that it's guess what's in the teacher's head, it's facts, it's tests, and they're one of the top nations for PISA, and according to our education ministers over the years, we have to be like Singapore. But what a lot of the parents who have done well in the school system were complaining about in these various blogs and things online is how it just didn't do them enough. Do well at school, you'll get a good job, yes, but what about thinking? What about creativity? What about compassion? What about well-being? What about all the things that really, emotional intelligence that really matter? So they wanted something better. And I remember going into work with this group of girls in a circle, observed by so many teachers, thinking this might go terribly wrong because they've not been asked to think before. They've just been asked to know stuff before. But within minutes, these girls were just fantastic. You sort of scratch the surface and you realise just how wonderful their thinking was. And you realise that their system will never know how good their thinking was because it never asked them to think in that way. But it's just there. Kids are capable of it. You just need to come at things in a different way. That was all. So that was
what the brain's thirsty for as well. I'm guessing.
I mean, children ask questions. The question mania, it's called. You'll find that with yours. Your oldest is 3.5, but give it another year or so, and it'll be, why is this like this? And why is that like that? And it's natural. But we tend to sort of, I don't know, knock it out of them, or the system doesn't. The system is not designed for children to seek answers to their own questions, which is how P4C works. You give them a stimulus and you come up with the question. They come up with the questions, and then learning becomes the process by which they seek answers to their own, guided by the teacher, because you might have a curriculum to cover. But it's active, not passive.
I'm guessing if you're committed to that way of teaching, though, the brain can unlearn that sort of rigid nature quite quickly and be like, go back to curiosity, which is probably its default setting. Yeah,
you need to work on that it's safe, that it's secure, that you're still going to get the exams, because that's the challenging one. It's logically obvious that if I teach you what you need for the exam and then you sit the exam, that's the way to do it. It's less logical to say, let's do it in a slightly different way, but you'll still get the results. But which is why it's easy for people to say, direct transmission teaching is the only way, because you're getting the facts into their brains and you're making sure it stays there so that they can regurgitate in an exam. It's an obviously logical thing to do, and I can understand why it's popular, and it has its place. It certainly has its place. But the phrase that I keep coming back to with teachers is, what are they learning while you're teaching them? And if I'm learning in a way that's more collaborative, that's less efficient, where there's more failure, I'm still working towards getting the grades that I want. I'm still learning the stuff, but I'm learning other things at the same time, rather than what are they learning while you're teaching them in a direct transmission command and control sort of situation in the classroom. Sit down, sit still, know your place, do what you're told. My knowledge is more important than your knowledge. My culture is more important than your culture. I'll decide what's important. I'll decide what we focus on, not you. So they're learning that passivity in the spirit of academic standards, or in the name of academic standards.
Quite similar to Martin saying what is taught and what is learned are two separate things.
There you go. Yeah.
I do love, because he had a lad, Billy Gallimore, who's this really naughty lad, but he loves Martin to bits, and Martin taught him Macbeth and all these wonderful things. But what Billy remembers Martin for is because Martin sent him out to count the railings outside, because he was being naughty. But it was like, that was just a beautiful way to handle that situation. And that's what he thinks of Martin. He loves him for that moment. And it's like, what you think you're doing all these great things in your head, but what their experience is very different often. Yeah.
So,
brilliant.
Yeah. And what are they learning while you're teaching them? Do we want young people to leave our education system regardless of their qualifications? Let's hope they get the best education can, keep on learning. But do we want them to be active, to have agency, to feel that they can make a difference? I mean, one of my first proper book, Essential Motivation in the Classroom, talked about 7 keys to having intrinsically motivated learners who wanted to learn from the inside. And number 7 on the list was hope. And this hope, the best definition of hope, and we know hope works at a neurological level. Hope fires a neuron, as I heard Professor John Macbeth say years ago, hope fires a neuron. It changes things neurologically. And the best definition of hope we've come up with is things can get better and I can do something about it. So it's not just this vague Pollyanna-ish sort of hope, oh, things will be better. What am I going to do? A bit like in the conversation we were having earlier about social mobility. What are you going to do about it? Why, why is that then? Things can get better and I can do something about it. So, but the second part, you've got to have that sense of agency, that sense of that I can make a difference to my world. And if the school system takes that away by creating passive learners who are, like I was at school in many ways, just sitting there doing what they were told.
Yeah.
There's the marble going out, there's the chute, and then the marble will carry on in that same trajectory. But we need, I feel, we need an education system that gets kids to be argumentative and disruptive and challenging and to see things differently. Because if things don't change, we're in a mess. We're in a mess now.
We are in a mess.
But things have got to change. So,
and thank God there's some great associates out there talking about that mess.
We are the nails at the bottom of your marble pipe.
Yeah. Oh, mate, such a beautiful metaphor. Also, one thing I wanted to know: the Thunks book is the original Thunks book. Looks like the Bible, sort of.
Yep.
I love that.
It was actually, I asked the designers to create it and including the font that we chose for it, like a hymn book.
Nice.
So it's interesting you say Bible because it was based on the idea of a hymn book. I don't know why I thought of that at the time, but it was the hymn book idea.
That was the vibes I was getting.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed that.
Serious.
The story at the start as well about the girl with the toothpaste. The girl that there was a mathematician, and he said, "Oh, everything's got an answer." It's your book, this one.
Yeah. It's a while since I'll have
a
to check
small
that.
story. I just wondered if it was a real one, because I'll try and give it you then.
Yeah.
It was there's
go
a
on.
mathematician and I think an English teacher and having this debate.
Right.
And the mathematician saying everything's got an answer, and then they go into this classroom. And he said, "Oh, I've got a question that hasn't. Like, what's a third of love?"
Okay.
And they didn't know what. Everyone was like, "Well, that's nonsensical. That isn't a question." But then a girl put her hand up and said, "Oh, a third of love is toothpaste."
Oh, I'd forgotten that.
Mate,
yes.
It actually
30
makes
years.
me emotional.
I'm getting on a bit,
Dude, honestly,
yeah.
I try to tell that story to people. Probably
yeah.
in a 50 of the episodes.
Well, thank you for telling it to me because I had forgotten.
I don't know what the other half was, but honestly, every time I explain that, it literally just fills my eyes up. It's a beautiful thing.
Because
Do you
her
know
dad,
that is a real story?
Yes, it's a real story. It was told to me.
Can you just tell it properly?
Yeah, thank you for bringing it back to life for me. It's after 30 years of so much good stuff that I've forgotten. For heaven's sake, I'll have to start again.
I'm bloody thrilled.
I'm better than I thought I was. Oh, crikey! What was in The Simpsons? Homer Simpson is told by his boss, "You're not as stupid as our best testing indicates." By Mr. Burns. You're not as stupid as our best testing
Mate,
indicates.
you always have a Simpsons reference.
That I've read 30 years of Simpsons. You know,
Whoa.
they've been with me all the way.
Don't want to sidetrack us too much. Do you like the new stuff, or are you kind of
It's amazing how they've retained their ability to be themselves, to be the Simpsons.
That's true.
Some of it they lose me a bit, but it still gets me. It's still good.
Topical and stuff as well.
Yeah. Well, they set the topic. They create the future, don't they?
Yeah,
So many
they
ways.
Do.
So the girl, the third of love, that was one of the most warm-up questions. We talk about the creative, not the philosophical questions, and what's the third of love? And a lot of people will go, I don't know what you're on about. But then more creative ones will go like le or LC, because if you write it on the board, L and a bit of the O becomes L and a C. So there's lots of ways you can play with the third of love. It's a bit like what's 1 + 1? And you say, it's 2. Okay, well, if I've got one raindrop and another raindrop, how many raindrops have I got? And you add them together, it's like, I've got one raindrop. So 1 and 1 can be 1 sometimes. So you play with reality in that way.
You could do a heart with a pie chart on it.
Yeah. So, and this teacher fed back to me that this girl had said third of love toothbrush. He said, well, what do you mean toothbrush? And it turns out her parents had split up, but had got back together again. And the first stage in that reconciliation, the father had left a toothbrush back at mum's house again. And the girl had noticed that. So third of love was toothbrush. And it was just
it literally,
absolute,
it really does.
I'd forgotten that. That was Corby.
Yeah. Oh, mate, what is your life? You haven't travelled, lad.
Yeah, I haven't travelled. I've just been to Corby. That's all. Yeah, all roads lead to Corby. But yeah, it's that level of creativity. But you don't see that in children and get the chance to appreciate it and for them to feel good. Which is what happened. I remember one of the things I used to teach was like memory strategies, and there's lots of ways to improve our memories, and the current trend is just repetition. You just go over and over and over again, and that gets it in. But there's other ways as well. And I remember doing sort of various memory stuff. One of the very first insets that I did in a staff room up in Yorkshire, and I was just doing some memory stuff, and one of the teachers there was saying, "Well, what's the point? Why do I need, why do I need to do this?" And the teacher next to us said, "Look, I've just done this and I thought I had a bad memory and I feel brilliant. I feel really good because I've just got 10 out of 10 and I never got 10 out of 10 in anything before." And then you realise that, yeah, you might play some little games with memory strategies. There's lots of different memory stuff out there. Fun memory stuff. And it might seem pointless, but if you suddenly get 10 out of 10 and you've never had 10 out of 10 before, you suddenly go, well, if I can do that, what else can I do?
Yeah.
So there's the hope, there's the optimism,
Empowering.
there's the change, there's the language that if I can do that, what else can I do? And that's what you want. So it's like, third of love toothbrush. The teacher smiled. I've smiled. She said, "Oh, that's brilliant. I would never have thought that. Oh, if I can do that, what else can I do?" So that's one of the impacts of the thunks that I've noticed over the years is the effect that it has on the kids with perhaps low self-esteem, low confidence. That one of the first groups I worked with on it as part of this Northamptonshire project in just near Milton Keynes. The head of year 11, she said, "Look, we know what we're doing with our." No, it's head of year 10, with our sort of troublesome lot. We know what we're doing with our, as they were at the time, gifted and talented G&T kids. She said, what about the grey children, the lost boys and girls? She called them the ones in the middle, perhaps low confidence, low self-esteem, didn't raise their hand. And I worked with them over the course of a year. Just every few weeks, they'd have an hour with me. And you could really see these kids grow. Yes, we developed their thinking and their curiosity and all those other things we've talked about, but you could really see them grow in terms of their belief in themselves. One of the ways I played with it, because you sit in a circle for philosophy for children, but I'd have them moving around. So it's like, okay, if you think this, move to this side of the circle. If you think yes to this side, if you think no, go to the other side of the circle. If you think something else, go in the middle. And at one point, I remember every child was over on one side of the circle, except there was one girl standing there on the let's say the yes answer, and you could see she was now really exposed. Suddenly she was on her own, and you could see part of her was wanting to sort of crawl back. Oh, sorry, knocking your microphone. You're talking with my hands. So it's the language teacher in me. Wanted to crawl back and sort of disappear amongst the group, but she held her ground, and I was, with a smile, and I was positive, and I said, tell the other lot why they're wrong. And she started talking about what she thought about whatever the thunk was, and then suddenly children started sort of drifting across towards her, because I never thought of that, and you could see her almost physically growing, because suddenly it's like the words that are coming out of my mouth are changing the universe.
Yes, yeah.
I can make
Everyone's
an
reality.
impact. I can change reality with my words. And it just, that's one of the huge things. That's why I talk about that's why I've pushed the thunks amongst other things, but sort of pushed the thunks over the years. You can see kids who have been written off, or in this Australia school that I was talking about, in Australia, it was a group, and they were just brilliant. And we were talking about if you switch a light bulb off, if you have a sort of light bulb in a box, and if there's no, I can't even remember what the thunk was now. So it's
It's
a long
like the
time
cat
ago.
in a box question.
Well, like carrot in a box. If you put a mirror, that's it. If you I've got a light bulb in a box, there's no other light coming in, and you switch the light on from remotely. If you switch the light on and then off, and if I put a mirror in the box, is there now twice as much light? That's the thing. There's probably good physics answers to that question, but it leads us in nicely in a philosophical, curiosity-based way to think about the physics. And then there was another question: if there's a light in the middle of a room and I switch the light off, which bit of the room gets dark first? And then suddenly this lad starts getting really animated. He starts talking about that. He says, darkness travels faster than light. He said, I've seen it in a thing, he said. And when we sort of interrogated it, there was a video where is a science teacher who does these videos for kids, and one of the things he talked about was the speed of darkness and how darkness travels faster than light if you look at it in a certain sort of way. And this kid was so animated and so full of himself and so happy that he had
to share
changed
that as well.
the minds of the teachers that were me and the other teachers who were in the room. And then it was afterwards that I found that this was like the nurture group. This was the special needs group. These were the kids who were not accessing the curriculum in a way that others were, but I didn't know. Because I wasn't asking those sorts of questions. I was asking questions about their thinking, and their thinking was phenomenal.
Wow.
So that sense of self-esteem growth that you get from working in this questions without answers, where you can't be wrong, is hugely important, and again overlooked in an education system that just prioritizes knowledge, the right answer, and all of those sorts of approaches.
Was that a pioneering factor to get you into lots more classrooms there with ITL, to go to more conferences, meet more people and broaden that horizon? Was it the thunks that sort of set that trajectory?
It was part of it. I mean, I was doing stuff before the thunks around, learning and multiple intelligences, which has been sort of sidelined along with learning styles, but multiple intelligence was never part of learning styles, and it's still hugely valid in terms of the potentiality that every human has got, which might be different. Your skill with words and with music is different from somebody else's skill with horses and with maths. We're allowed to be different. We can't all be. We don't have to be clever in the same way. So the question, not how smart are you, but how are you smart, is a massively important question. But it's been sort of sidelined as we try and make everybody the same to fit them into an education system.
You say things that are just so simple, and they go, why aren't we thinking like that?
I'll just keep banging my drum, and eventually we will, maybe. So I was doing lots of stuff and doing it in a way that was, I think when I was starting banging my drum or tooting my own trumpet, or whatever, Inset was very boring. Education books were very boring, and I just tried to bring a humour to it, music to it,
new slant.
Yeah, just make people, just enjoy it more. So I ended up then, getting quite busy because the message was important. The messages were important. Gove hadn't arrived to sort of get rid of creativity and multiple intelligences and thinking of things differently and behaviour. The way we've ended up in England now, that hadn't yet started. So there was still that thinking skills were still a thing that we were looking at. There was personal learning and thinking skills. Mick Waters was doing stuff from his Quango that was shut down by Gove. In the primary curriculum, they had the Rose Review, which looked at the primary curriculum and put forward a far more creative, rounded, modern way of looking at the curriculum, and that was one of the first things that Gove got rid of. My wife, in her school in Rotterdam, she's international school head in Rotterdam, and she looked at the Rose Review and has created the RIS, Rotterdam International Secondary School, the RIS Rose curriculum, drawing on the research that Rose did at the time that was sort of dismissed, and very successful it is too, which is more about having a breadth of learning, a lot more independent learning, a lot more creativity in the curriculum, and it works. But it was it was sort of closed off amongst many other things. Environmental education closed off by Gove, critical thinking A levels closed off by Gove.
Grand conspiracy. Is there a reason behind all this? I know we're getting into the ether.
People have their views about what education should be like and how it should be measured.
Yeah,
and if measuring is a vital part of the education system, you can't measure what you can't improve, is what Michael Barber told Tony Blair. I mean, it started there, the performativity and the spreadsheets, and famously Michael Barber. Yeah, the market likes data, as I was told once. So you can't. What Blair was told by Barber apparently is, you can't improve what you can't measure. Therefore, you've got to have indicators to do with education that you could put on a spreadsheet. Which then means a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, creativity, well-being, emotional intelligence, internal motivation, excitement, all of those things suddenly become, well, you can't really measure them, so they become not important. We know they are. Good teachers know they are. We still do what we can, but suddenly it's the well, okay, well, we can measure results. We can put that into a league table.
I suppose also a big group of free thinkers, independent thinkers, can do quite powerful things too, and maybe not want to go toward a system.
We've got to. We work within the system, and we can't be so far out there that the people who are constrained by the system think, well, that's great, but I could never do that. That would be us doing them a disservice. But we can say to them, look, there is another way. Here's an example. Here's what we've done. Here's what I've done. Here's a book that reinforces that. Here's a video here's a education system that reinforces that. Here's a country where they're doing that. Here's a country where they're not doing it, and look where they're at. We can say, because of my experience living in places like Hong Kong and work in Singapore, and when the likes of Gove and Gibb, as they were doing at the time, were saying, we have to be like Shanghai and Singapore, and we can say, yes, okay, I see why they're saying that. What they're not saying is, let's look at the suicide rates of young people in Shanghai or Singapore. Wow. Let's look at other things. Let's look at the tutoring system, the what they call the shadow education system. Let's look at how kids are tutored every evening and every weekend. And that apparently they had to introduce a law in South Korea to stop kids being tutored after 10 o'clock at night, because maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. So by saying let's compare, we need to be as good as Shanghai, you're actually not comparing like with like. But it's sort of this pernicious choosing of the evidence. And I when I went to Singapore, I was hosted by the British Council there, and they'd had Gove on a visit, and they were sort of mortified how he had just chosen what he wanted to take back.
Wow.
And ignore a lot of the other stuff as well. And they said,
Unpicked.
"Oh, this is how Singapore is. We need to do this." And so all I can say is, here's some insights into this world that you perhaps didn't have, you didn't realise, like tutoring, for example, how it's a huge thing in these countries, and that use that knowledge to inform your decisions about how you react to what might be government policy, or how you react to what you're being told to do in the classroom.
I know in some of the buildings in those areas, when you were saying there's high suicide rates, they put like nets around the building now. That is
when we were in
so
Hong Kong, in
eerie.
most terms, there was a story of one child or another, including primary age children, who had taken their life. And when you've got tall buildings like that, it's not a difficult thing to do. So so the nets becomes.
So somebody's gone and seen that system and gone, oh, that's how to do it.
Yeah. Well, they've looked again. They've looked at the results.
Yeah.
Last time I looked at Singapore, the suicide rates as a population were going down, but were going up in young people. That was the last time I looked. And somebody had put forward a blog saying, cause and effect, we don't know. There needs more research. But that many of the countries whose PISA results were going up were also seeing sort of results in terms of increase in mental health issues with young people as well. So
I was watching a great documentary on Netflix just called Happy, and they went around the world and sort of interviewed people and looked at the suicide rates and everything. And I'm sure, I don't know if it's Singapore, but there's a terminology for suicide now, and for people that literally work themselves to death.
Yeah, okay.
And that is just inbuilt and ingrained in the nature of them. It's like go, achieve, push, and they're just dropping.
Yeah. In South Korea, they've got one of the lowest birth rates in the world, and it's dropping as well. So they're in real trouble, because they're not going to be enough people in the country to pay for the pensions for everybody else. And they think, why is that? And the government spent billions trying to encourage people to have children, but the philosophy there is just you work really hard. And women saying, I can't. If I stop to have a child, they'll think I'm not working hard enough. I can't do that. And in the interview, it said, and she went off on every Sunday she goes for a blood transfusion to keep her energy levels up, as if it was like she's going for a cup of coffee on a Sunday. So there's all of that sort of stuff as well. So I'm just saying to schools, look, I've had this really privileged life over the last 15 years or so, of living in Dubai, living in Chile, living in Hong Kong, traveling to and working in other places like Australia. Rotterdam now. My wife's going at some point. We'll be moving elsewhere as well, so I get to see all sorts of things. It's this privileged position of it that I can then feed back to schools, to teachers in this country, and say, look, it's not necessarily the way that you're being told it is. It's not a lie, but there's a bigger picture. Have a think about this. Be aware of that. There's also this going on. So to encourage them to think for themselves. It's back to independent thinking, what it's all about, to think for themselves.
So I saw that there's something where the light, and it only has to go off like a degree, but then it keeps going out and out and out, and you see how big. So if it's a slight problem, it goes out and it becomes a very big problem.
Yeah.
And that's how it can be. You've just seen a very small slice of, that's what works. Yeah. But then you've got it off cue a little bit, and it just keeps on broadening and becoming a growing mistake.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that does. And then we sort of, and then if we're being told there is no alternative, it's the only way, then we just think, well, there's no way back. We just have to carry on.
What about the happiest places to live on Earth? some
Yeah,
things
well,
that
I mean,
correlate
Finland is always comes up high on the list. This sort of high tax society, which because we don't want to pay high taxes, do we? We as a country, Finland, where free healthcare for all, where the president's wife will be in the hospital bed next to you because there's no private healthcare there, as far as I'm aware. That or it's not private schools. It's just everything's equal. You've access to great schools, great healthcare. People just sort of seem to get on. So we'll see. It is a happy place compared to lots of other. And their PISA results have gone down a little bit, but it's like who cares? Like in the Netherlands, it's whenever they do research on the happiest children, Netherlands always comes out top, and their PISA results are sort of middling, somewhere around Wales, I think. And it's but they don't really care because it's. Is it
slightly hard to collect data on that, as it is a subjective, like happy? Is it?
But there are. however it's done, they do measure it. So
right, okay.
So fairly regularly they will measure, and there are various indicators that they use for it. But yeah, Finland comes up tops in terms of happiest nation. The other Scandinavian countries are never far away. Netherlands is up there as well. And then for children, Netherlands is always quite high. UK currently is ranking very low for children's well-being. The PISA results that came out in December 2023, Wales hadn't done very well. England had gone up in the tables, so the government was able to say, "Oh yes, look, we're doing well in the PISA tables." But then when you I was reading the BBC article about it this morning, actually, the difference between something like 12th place and 5th place was statistically insignificant. It's just like a fraction of a percent. So all that effort to say, "Oh look, we're 5th on the league tables now," but it's statistically insignificant. And we're back to that question: at what cost? But the headline of the article was what PISA had said is, how many children in England were going to school hungry? How many children were missing out? When asked, did you have a meal? Do you have access to meals every day? Do you have breakfast every day? England was very low compared to places like the Netherlands, where children get breakfast. So these are the factors at play that we need to be aware of. It's not just about the academic results. And
I did that. We play a little game with the kids, and we have one person in the middle. And it's change if. So you have to say something that's true for you, and then everyone changes if it's true for them, and you've got to try and get a chair. And I said, change if you've had some food today, change if you've eaten, because it was like one that was going to get everyone to move. Barely anyone moved. It was like, that was 5 o'clock. Change if you had a nice meal today, or had a meal today. No one moved. Wow. I was like, what's wrong with you?
Change if you're hungry.
Come with me, everyone. We'll go and get some fodder. It was really odd. Yeah, I thought, okay, I've got another go now, and just kept getting it wrong. No, maybe they just weren't changing. It did eventually.
But that throws up this. Schools are responsible for kids getting results. No, they're not. There's all this other stuff that's going on around. Are they hungry? Are they society? Are they at a food bank? Are they? This whole model of society there, where schools are held accountable for the results, but there's all these other things that are impacted. This is why we try to talk about this in the Working Class book. And Square Pegs, another collaborative book that came out just last year. It's going really well.
Some name drops in here.
Yeah. Buy the books. Buy the books. Money goes to Square Pegs. Money goes to charities. There are bigger societal issues that schools can't fix, but they're getting the blame for. These kids aren't behaving. These kids aren't doing this, aren't doing that. But if you're hungry, or you're scared, or you're being moved around, there's so many factors at play that will decide whether a child's in a state to learn or not, that are outside of the school's control, but are part of what society is how it's made up.
And you said you did do a lot of travelling and went into lots of different classrooms in different parts of the world.
Yeah, not just Corby. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I was doing this whole conversation thinking, it's just Corby you're referring to all this, isn't it? Was there a wow factor moment? Was there a place that you went to and thought, this is insanely good. They're doing this really well?
I think everywhere.
The classroom was buzzing.
Yeah, I've seen. One of our associates, Julie Rees, had a values-based education school, VBE school, values at school. So it was the first school I visited when she was head of this school. It was a sort of rural Gloucestershire, sort of near the woods, near the forest. And it seemed like, nice place and nice old architecture and everything, but it was a lot of rural poverty, a lot of issues in this school, in the community, shall we say. But her school was, because it was a values-based school, because they prioritise a certain number of values, and every month they'd focus on a different value, and they would live and breathe these values, and children would talk about this honesty or friendship or trust, and the whole community was involved. You know, the lady on the desk when you walked in, the caretaker, they were all involved in these conversations about these values. And then you go round and you hear kids talking about these values and living these values. That's mind-blowing when you see a whole school that's just engrossed in these positive values despite the challenges outside the school gates. I was there at one point to visit, and it was Children in Need Day, I think, and the way that they do an assembly is every child comes in silence in a positive way, not because they've been shouted at the door on the way in, but because it's a almost spiritual, moving, human, visceral experience to walk in silence. And there's a candle at the front, and the head teacher, Julie's sitting at the front in like an armchair. And there's that moment of every child knows that it's about a moment of reflection and calm and peace. And then, except it was Children in Need Day, so they're all in onesies.
Okay.
So there's all these sort of Winnie the Poohs, and the head teacher at the front in her pajamas.
In the Buddhist pose.
So it was just sort of absurd but beautiful all at the same time, which is and we regularly will send other associates and other visitors to that. So I mean, she's left as a head just recently, but we've often sent people to her school. And Jim Smith, who I taught lazy teacher, we sent him to look at the school, and he just told me, just sat in the car park afterwards in tears, just how amazing at a sort of emotional, visceral level just going to this school was. So there's that, and there's also another associate, Jonathan Lear, in Sheffield, inner city Catholic primary school. He realised that doing the curriculum the way that the government was telling him to do was just ridiculous. You know, you're going to make a slipper, not two, one, a slipper. And he just remembers looking around his classroom at these single slippers, going, what? And he just sort of totally with him and the school, he's a deputy at the school, sort of just recreated what he called guerrilla teaching, just recreated a curriculum, made it real, made it relevant, and just transformed the nature of his school. And Phoebe, my daughter, when she did her placement for her degree, sort of children's development degree, she had a placement at that school, and she had a placement at two schools, two very different experiences, and just loved his school, which was just where the learning was brought to life, even though both schools were dealt with children with similar sorts of challenges from a similar sort of inner city Sheffield background.
Were those classrooms what some teachers would constitute as naughty classrooms? Was it like loud and movement? In a good way. This is why. A classroom where everybody's really quiet. There's a place for that. I'm okay with that. But when everybody has to be quiet. I worry about that. Same as when I walk down a school corridor and look at the classrooms and empty classrooms and all the tables arranged in rows. I'm thinking, okay, I know what's going on here. So a noisy classroom for me is, I want that. I want that buzz. I want that energy. I want to be able to bring it down again. And I want and working in silence has a place. Yeah. And a sense of peace, and especially for certain children who just may need a little bit of calm as well. That's fine. So I'm making a sort of a sinus wave with my finger here. Just have your ups and have your high moments and have your buzz, but then bring it back down again and work in that way, rather than has to be like this all the time. I think young people really enjoy structure though as well. They enjoy having it handed to them. They can't just be full autonomy.
It's a bit of both, isn't it? It's a bit like creativity. It's structure, but have the freedom to play around with that. And older children, we can move to the teenage years, they also need something to push against. So
I've got a 3.5-year-old.
But you to give them the structure, but the fact that they're going to push against it is okay, because that's part of growing. They need
for both parties as well. For the
I remember reading Eels. This is what's coming back to. I remember reading an article about the developing brain, and ultimately what I boiled the article down to was eels, which was sort of they need enthusiasm, excitement, love and structure. That's what they need in their life. Enthusiasm, Enthusiasm, excitement, love and structure. I think that's those things.
Yeah.
So they need that sense of positivity, that sense of belief, that excitement of this is going to be fun, this is going to be enjoyable, this is going to be a challenge, this is going to be hard, I'm going to fail but pick myself back up, all of those sorts of things. Unconditional love and unconditional positive regard is a big part of what people like associates like Vic Goddard and Dave Whittaker talk about. Dave Whittaker's book The Kindness Principle is all about this. It's harder to be kind to a child.
Yeah.
But he gets in.
When they've told you to F off
Yeah.
for multiple days.
Yeah. He tells Dave Whittaker, who runs a series, or was, he's now sort of just stepped to one side a little bit, but was, basically head of a special school in Barnsley, and then a series of special schools and PRUs and alternative provision schools around that part of the world. And he talks, and he's always believed in unconditional positive regard. That you will deal with behaviour, you will support, you'll do what you need to do, but you'll do it in a way where you're constantly holding the child in unconditional positive support. And he tells the story of the girl. They wait on the gates every morning. The girl comes through the gates. Morning, Stacey, or whatever it is, and she'd say "hung off," and the following day, "Morning, Stacey, hung off." And he said there was like a year of hung offs until finally she went, "Yeah, morning, sir," and went in. And he said that was just a breakthrough moment. And I said, your book should be called A Year of Hung Offs. That would be but he said his mum wouldn't like that title, so we went with the kindness principle. But him and
You're the best at titles.
The Guardian did an article about kindness and how battering them with kindness is how they do it. And Vic Goddard was cited from Educating Essex. That head teacher was cited in the article as well. And they got all sort of stick on social media for being soft, and they, by people who didn't get it, but who just had this belief that children need to be broken, literally broken before they can, anything can happen to them academically. And during the lockdown, we were doing lots of webinars, and I remember Vic and Dave Whittaker on a call, and just this idea: how come head teacher is kind to children is a headline? How come that's news? What sort of upside down world have we got where the news is somebody's kind to a child in need? These are children. If you imagine a PRU in Barnsley, these children who have suffered and struggled to even get to school. So unconditional love, unconditional positive regard, and kindness is a big thing that we push.
It's as if as a species, a lot of our thoughts are, it's this way or that way. It's so absolute. Yeah. If it's like that, we need to swing it all the way back round and just be terrible to them. I was watching a programme, it was a Camp America.
Right.
And there was a Camp Krusty. I didn't realise Camp Krusty, the Simpsons episode, was based on what happened in America. And they were literally off-the-wall kids at a certain teenage, and they've probably just not been given any boundaries or any sort of sense of right and wrong. And so what they literally did was get these army people to come in the middle of the night, wake them up, literally take them into a car to the desert, and they were taken to this camp. And then people ended up dying of thirst and dehydration. And mate, I'll send you the documentary because it was wild.
It rings a bell. The whole boot camp thing.
I couldn't believe what was what.
Camp Krusty ends with a Lord of the Flies moment. I seem to remember Bart Simpson's there with the pigs' heads on his.
Not far off actually. I think they did revolt and things changed. It happened in Fiji as well because the guy realised he could make a lot of money and profit out of these people that were on the last straw with their kids.
Wow.
Desperation. So he created this camp, and then it got found out it was really dangerous. Took it from America and then took it to Fiji, and it got even worse, and there was some horrific things happen. But it's just like there's no logic in, okay, they're terrible because of we've been too soft, so let's just be really horrible now. No, let's build our way back of here's another boundary we can add. And
this polarity, and this is something that in England that I've seen Gove using to divide and conquer. Let's create trads and progs, goods and bad, the way you should do it, the way you shouldn't do it. Let's laugh at those who are doing it the way they shouldn't be doing it.
Gooeys and spikies.
But whatever that is, young man, no idea. But it works. It works. The world is like this, and you think the world is different, therefore you're wrong. And you see it across social media, you see it across Twitter, you see it in wider society as well, and good is and bad is. And I think it was a QI fact a couple of weeks ago. I discovered that in Argentina during the military regime in the 80s, they banned Venn diagrams. A Venn diagram, you've got overlapping circles named after, I think it was a vicar or a priest called Mr. Venn, or Father Venn, I think that's where it comes from. But the idea that there's overlapping circles, there's one thing and one thing and one thing and another, but somewhere in the middle where there's circles overlap, there's a common ground.
They're like, that doesn't exist.
But they were banned as subversive because, and you see it, it makes sense. If make the world black and white's wrong, or make the world black and white and black's wrong, whatever you want to play. Make the world A and B, and you're B and we're A, therefore you're wrong. So anything in the middle is weakness, is subversive. But the Marxist dialectic? That's probably why they didn't like it as well. The Marxist dialectic is you've got a thesis and an antithesis. I say this, you say that, and let's come up with a synthesis in the middle of the Venn diagram, the overlapping bits, which is better than your position and my position, is actually a better thing altogether. And I think Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective, Highly Successful People.
Yeah.
So
Have you heard of Headway?
Yes.
I've started listening to that now.
Okay.
50-minute segments.
It's good. Yeah. And I mean, Stephen Covey just looked at what effective people did. I think it was effective rather than successful, and just sort of narrowed it down to 7 things. And one of them is about, it's not, I don't think he calls it compromise, but he says, compromise is what you want. Neither of us get what we want. And that's, who wants that? So the win-win is actually where the thing that's come together is better than what either of us wanted in the first place. So that's the synthesis. That's the Venn diagram. I wanted A, you wanted B. Together we've got A, B, and actually A, B is much better than A or B. So that's the win-win situation that he talks about that we should work towards, rather than I want synthesis. You to see my view.
It's a nice word as well. So like synergy, like
well, so the syn means coming to. I think means it's that sense of coming together. I think that's what that is. Synergy.
I'll ask Martin later.
Yeah,
he'll know.
Yeah, it'll be So and what you've also got is 2 + 2 = 5. That's synergy as well. That the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So this is where independent thinking. So if we're like today, we've got an event running for primary head teachers in Maidstone. And Dave Harris, who was our Brave Heads guy, I talked about Brave Heads lazy teacher. He wrote the book Brave Heads. This idea that we need teachers who are brave and head teachers who can raise their head above the parapet in as positive a way as possible. So he's there. Nina Jackson, another associate, does a lot of work around well-being and creative teaching and learning. And then Alison Creel, one of our newest associates, who does a lot of work around equity and inclusion within the primary sector. So the 3 of them will be there, and they'll all be doing their bit. But the fact that they're there together, and if they're 3 circles overlapping, that bit in the middle is, and no, you can't plan for that, you can't prepare that, but there's going to be some specialness in the room because those 3 are together,
right? Because
the vibrations are similar, they're very different. 3 very different people. They're very different, come at things in very different ways. But there's that resonance that we talked about at the beginning is there, and that will.
It's this thing you've curated though there, as bringing those people together. Cause I like that proverb: a camel is a horse. Is it the other way around?
A camel is a horse designed by a committee.
I've been in rooms and environments like that where you've just got too many people in there, and they're all adding in their bit, and it just gets very bitty and scratchy.
Yeah, itchy and scratchy. The curator is. It's a nice word. I was asked once what my job was, and it was sort of a curator of interesting educators. I think that's within independent thinking. That's why people like you are part of it. You're not a trained teacher. You are an educator in the wider sense of what we mean by education. And curation, curiosity and curation have similar roots, and same as care, to care for. If we're curious about things, we care for it. We curate it. It's what we look after things. So when I did a 3-month sailing around Britain around deeply project using multiple intelligence 8-way thinking as the model to look at the world differently and interrogate the British Isles differently, it was because I want people to be curious, because if they're curious, they might then end up looking after things better than they were before because of their curation, because of the roots of the word there. So I'm happy to be a curator and encourage curiosity.
One thing, you've mentioned loads of the associates there. Where did it snowball? When did you start just handpicking and going, these are great, these are my people? Because it's 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm graduate. I mean, come on, I need the balloons coming down. I can do After Effects.
Yeah, there we go. Put them in.
Confetti.
Everything that I think I've ever planned with ITL hasn't worked. I had to do a business plan right at the very beginning to open up a bank account. So, you write your business plan and do your cash flows and everything. And sometimes you have to plan things and put forward proposals, and they never work. But if you just go with the flow, go organically, stay positive, keep your value, keep open, keep curious, then things just happen. And the things that have happened.
You've got.
I'm going in the right direction. If you want to be a leader, you've got to be moving.
Yes.
Otherwise, people can't follow you, as they say. What's the phrase? You might be on the right tracks, but if you're not moving, you still get run over. Something like that, I think, is the phrase. So I've always been sort of moving forward with the ideas, but in terms of actually having a plan to how I'm going to do things, if I have had a plan, it hasn't worked, and I've just let things happen, and they have worked. ITL probably is 30 years old because I'm not very good at business. I think if I'd have been more of a business person, I'd have tried lots of things and broken ITL a long time ago, or I don't know, made loads of money and sold it or something like that. But it's something we realised not that long ago, that ITL, it's a limited company, it's a for-profit company, but we're there to make a difference, not make a profit. That's what drives us, if you like. It's not just a question of chasing them. So we will never say, okay, well, the government is now pushing X, Y, or Z. Let's run courses on X, Y, and Z. That's not us. That's not what we do. And I'd rather not earn money than be stuff that isn't true with our values, really. And our values are: it's about creativity, it's about compassion, it's about authenticity. It's the child at the centre of things, and we'll never change on that. You'll never get us to change on anything.
Well, mate, 2 and a bit hours so far.
Is it?
It seems incredible. All I want to talk about then here is it got darker since you've, ITL, and then you see what's happening in the world, and you're saying it's going in a certain direction. Do you have hope? Do you have optimism? Where are you at?
Yeah, because I'm in education, and the educator hasn't got hope.
It's not ITL's fault, by the way.
Thanks for that. Yeah, 30 years on.
Since ITL got involved in education.
It will be a better place without Ian Gilbert messing with people's heads, making their brains hurt. You have to stay hopeful, otherwise your brain closes down. You said hope fires a neuron. So I stay hopeful. Underneath ITL, I have what I call my 6 voices. So the things that will determine where I focus ITL's energy. So things like the environment and well-being and inclusion and society, creativity. So there are things that will drive the books that we haven't talked about the books that we sort of produce, or the associates that we want to take on board, or new associates, or the messages we put out in our mail shots. Or,
are you going to try and keep it at 50, or are you, if it's a great human, you're going to?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
You're collecting
we'll
Pokemon.
See. Yeah, we'll see. Occasionally, I have a cull. Yeah. Occasionally, I sort of will. Some people will. Their lives have changed and things move on, so they'll sort of come off the website, and some new people will sort of come in, and that's good for any organisation. These new people coming in, and you don't have the group think. But it's also good from a commercial point of view, is because people come back to us year after year for conferences, for inset, and there's a sense of, okay, we've had him, her, and her. What else have you got? Have you got somebody new? And they know that coming to us, we've done the work to make sure they're great people.
Sure that, yeah.
The money back guarantee is there, but also that we've chosen wisely amongst the new associates that we've got.
Is that a big learning from you along the years as well? How to choose what? Do you feel you stop making snap decisions? Or?
Well, yeah. Dave Harris, who works very, when the requests come into independent thinking sort of head office, as it were, which is the phone in his pocket most of the time. So he's the one
really proper.
Yeah, I would make a snap decision because I believe in trust the gut.
Yeah,
it's something that I've believed in right from when I was an advertising copywriter. When you've really got a good headline, let's say, because of something that sparks inside your gut. You can come up with 10 ones that your brain could say, oh yeah, that'll work, and suddenly the one will just, and you'll feel it inside your belly. And you go, oh yeah, that's the one we need. So trusting the gut, I do that, and I have done that with most associates. Dave Harris works his gut is impressive, but also just gets me to slow down a little bit. So no, we need to see them, we need to do this. So there's, but on the whole, my gut is pretty. There's been a few. There's only 2 who I have unleashed on the world, and I'm not so sure about. But that's
when
okay.
It's not worked. You've still got to go with your gut, because it's all you've got. That's your authenticity and
back to that word authenticity, which compassion, creativity, authenticity. That's what at the heart of how we operate. Yeah. And even if for some people it hasn't worked out, and that's okay.
No names though, but what did you unleash? What was it?
That's one for off.
Yeah, okay. I was speaking.
Forget the coffee. Get me a whiskey, then I'll tell you.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be there. But
okay. But some of them they've been great people. It just hasn't worked for whatever reason. And I've always wanted that, even if it's just a short time, that whoever comes into contact with that grows as a result. That's what I've always wanted. So okay, it's not for you working in this way. That's fine, but actually I feel I'm a better, bigger, whatever person I am now than I was before. And even the ones whose names I won't mention, they have gone on to be bigger and better than they were when they started. So, I never want. It's always got to be a positive experience, even if it's a briefer experience than others. But then we've had some who have been, right, people like Roy Layton and Dave Keating, right from the Jackie Beer, right from the early days.
Wow.
And are still there and are still reinventing, evolving, and are still doing great stuff with kids, with teachers, with head teachers.
So you've got your Premier League stars now. Is that?
I always had to make. I had to make the decision at one point. Do I find the people who are doing really good stuff and then sort of get them on the books, or do I find the people who are just starting out but have real potential and give them that platform to grow? And that's the way that I've done things. So working with people who are just starting out and to support them, give them the platform, give them a sense of family, which is what ITL has got. We're not, while we work at a bit like a speakers bureau, as in people ring us up and we give them a speaker, there's a family feel to it. So like the fact that Dave and Nina and Alison are there together today, they know each other, they've worked together, they've shared platforms before, we've spent time, we've had meals together. So, there's that real family sense there, even though we're different, we don't always agree.
Because I mean, at the start of me doing things and then going on either a BBC radio show or putting stuff out there, I had a few get in touch, like speaker, that they sign you into schools. But God, some of them made you feel dirty after. Genuinely, it's sort of, you're just a data point for them. And there was one in particular that I won't mention, but it was run by a big star, and he could never make it, and he'd let him down last minute, and they'd just throw me in. And again, the guys who organised it would just be there chatting in the back. He should have been here and everything like that, and it just made you feel worthless. Genuinely, you don't care about the kids. Because really what happened is that star would come and lead out a bike, and it's like, hey, look who did great, see you later. I don't know what it was for, and I'm sure that guy's a wonderful human, but actually going for dinners with you guys, going for drinks, talking about things that matter, it was a family atmosphere, and I love that you cultivated that.
It's just sort of curated, and it's just sort of happened. And we've all got families of our own as well, but it has just that sense of just nice
and
people
coming
together.
It's not like we're going to be a family.
Join my tribe. We can't. You can't contrive it. And every family's got its weird uncle sitting in the corner, wetting himself drunk, and we've got all of that. We've got the whole gamut of the family is there, and not everybody sees eye to eye. And
you see my dancing,
and
as
that's
well. Go for it.
And that's fine. And these big days out that we do. I mean, that you talked about the video that you saw on YouTube of me way back with long hair that wasn't grey, working with these kids. That was one of the first big days out, which specimen. was to launch Independent Thinking, the book Independent Thinking, the very first one that we did, and it was at Dave Harris's previous school. So we had all the associates all doing little bits, contributing during the day, which is a model that we've used then in various schools. And we've got another one coming up in Sheffield on the 28th of June with over 30 different associates, our birthday as well. So we'll be there, and there'll be keynotes, and there'll be workshops, and there'll be face-to-face and all sorts of things. But that was what you saw. I was in a room behind the stage with a group of kids, and that was being filmed to then be broadcast live to the audience as well as then recorded. So that was what you saw. But it was one of these big days out where everybody just comes together. We don't the associates don't pay. We don't pay them for their time. We pay their expenses. We don't pay them for their time. But they're happy to collaborate, to watch each other, to learn from each other. To have a few drinks the night before, have a meal the night before, and that model has still gone on, even though that was ever many years ago. There's another one in, like I say, in Sheffield on 28th of June. So
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you're there. You're there for that one.
100% there. Yeah. I've put in my orders already.
When you saw that you were there for the Oxford one, you were filming some of the Oxford one as well,
yeah.
weren't you? A few years ago. That was our 25th birthday, I think.
Cool. 5 years.
We had balloons. Was it 25? Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a much better mental space at the minute, so I'm
Good.
ready for that.
Good.
Yeah.
There we are. You see, so it's not the world is improving.
Yeah.
Even with COVID, which came in the middle of that
globally
space, so.
and individually.
Yeah. Well, if you're good,
if you look in the right spaces,
the world will be good because you're doing good stuff. So,
mate, I want to leave with one question then, because we had a lot of avenues to go down.
Oh, yeah.
And if you could please come back,
I
think we could go down those routes. But I'm really happy that we've gone for ITL and education.
Yeah.
And for the people that are left now, hello, Nan. If there's a teacher listening to this, let's say, and they feel hopeless, out of control. They feel the whole system's just going downhill. Do you have anything to just leave them with, and just for them to simmer on and think about?
Yeah, I think two things. One is their emotional health is the priority. I remember saying to my kids, as they were sort of growing up and leaving home, I want priorities for you. I want you to be mentally healthy, physically healthy, educated and happy, and in that order. In that order. So I would say to the teacher, if they're struggling, which means their family will be struggling as well, it's not worth it. There's other stuff out there that if you're a teacher, you've got so many transferable skills you didn't even know were skills that other people will want there. So don't think it's the only thing you can do. Don't think you have to, that the job is worth dying for. Literally, it ain't.
Stress,
and people do. So cover that base. And if that base is covered, if you're not quite as extreme as that, then just know that there's another way, and then do your bit via Twitter. Block all the haters, block all the crap, block all the bullies on there, block and mute. Find your people who believe that there is an education in the way that can be delivered in the way that you believe it can be delivered. Make contact with us, because we've got the books, we've got the people. We can have a chat, we can set up a Zoom call, we can do anything to support and help you, and just point you in the direction of the fact that there is another way. So know that there's another way, and know too that pendulum swing. It's gone as far as it possibly can. It's not sustainable. Carrying on an education system the way it is at the moment in England is just not sustainable. Things are going to change. Things are coming back. You can see it now. People who were saying adamantly X are beginning to say, yeah, but maybe Y as well. Well, I thought you said X. Oh yeah, but need to pay a mortgage. So things are changing. Things are moving on. Things are evolving. Whereas, Dave Harris has always talked about the pendulum swinging, which is a nice way to think about it. Roy Layton talks about it more like a spiral, so that we might be covering similar ground we were before, but
same but different.
But we're a little bit more evolved,
which
is good. So there's a constant sense of growth there as well, which is maybe more optimistic than just the pendulum going backwards and forwards all the time. But either way,
similar to that saying, no man can stand in the same river twice.
Yeah, you can't go to the same big day out twice. That's exactly the same thing. It's always going to be different. So the things will move and things will change, and if you stick to your values, as soon as we start working against our values, that's when mental health issues can become a problem. What I say to head teachers is, cover your back and sleep at night. Do the things you need to do to get Ofsted quiet and keep their parents, do all that, but do it in a way where you feel, I did it the right way. I did it for the right thing. I still held true to my values. I didn't sell out. It's hard. Back to the brave heads. It's hard, and it's increasingly hard in a model that we've got that's punitive, that's bullying, that's is prepared to control from the top down. That's all the sorts of things that you see in some of the education academy chains now, and the people that have then ended up in positions of authority who have come from these controlling chains, let's say, it's unsustainable.
Mate, you're making me want to do a 5-hour episode, because the mental health and self-care is such a big topic, and something I think many people are struggling with at the minute, and I feel you've got a lot of great golden nuggets to help people.
I've got insights, let's say, one way or the other. I've got bruises. I've got stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna have to run this back, aren't we?
Yeah, I can come back. We've done how many hours? How much have we done now?
We're getting on for like 2.5 hours.
Wow, okay,
it's good. I've got to edit all this.
Yeah. 10 years later, everybody's worrying when it might come out.
Oh mate!
Happy Christmas, 2024! Yay! And to our Russian overlords.
It's sort of trivial. It's not trivial at all, but the social media thing. Oh mate, I added thousands of people because I thought like for like, and you get a big name or whatever and have loads of numbers. But I've completely cooled that to just people I care about. It took a long time, and I think I'm left with like 50 people now.
Yeah.
But that's really radically transformed what I see every day.
Yeah.
And my mental health is massively altered from that. I was just all the time, it was the good, the bad, the ugly, but mainly the bad.
Yeah. It's insidious. It's specious way of communicating with the world.
It's so simple. The mute button or the block button or whatever it is.
Yeah.
People feel obliged that they've got to keep the bad in their life. Like Chrissy, my best friend and my partner, she was in this cognitive dissonance of just feeling I've got to see the news though. I'm going to be out of touch with everything going on. But I'm like, it's literally paralysing you.
Yeah.
You love the kids to bits and you're just terrified of all these terrible things happening all the time. At least knock it on the head for a month or so and let's just see what it does for you.
Yeah.
And then you can add it back in if you really feel too out of touch.
Yeah.
But I just hate, this feeling of have to, I should, I have to. That's NLP, I suppose.
Yeah. You sort of change the language.
I should do that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why? What?
Yeah.
I want to is maybe a different...
Yeah, or I get to. Or
yeah.
I choose to.
Yes.
Yeah, again, the language we use will change.
But I have to. You're very trapped by that.
Yeah. No, it's a nasty old thing, and it feeds off itself, and I feel it as well. I know how I start the day. If the first thing I do is reach my phone and look at the BBC News, cross-reference that with Al Jazeera news app, which is interesting in terms of language and angles and all sorts of things, even though they're talking about the same stuff. And then you think, oh, I've got to get on with my day now, and it's just. And then if I don't do that, I'll do something more creative, for a while, because I was just finished a master's in creative writing. I want to write a proper book. We haven't talked about the books,
mate. Should we do 5 hours? Is that what you're asking for? I'll do it.
I might need a different cushion. These wooden benches. But yeah, in part of my creative writing masters, I just spent 15 minutes every morning just writing anything. I called them my 15s. So and that was a very different start to your day, where you get out of bed and just go to your laptop and just write on anything creative for 15 minutes as opposed to looking at the news or going through Twitter.
And some of that stuff, I'm guessing it's not something you're going to use. It's just there as
some of it I've used. I'm working on a book, so if any agents out there, get in touch. Called The Country That Ate Itself. So I'm using the stuff around everything that's happened around Brexit, around the state of this country at the moment, to create this sort of parallel universe, sort of Great Britain, hopefully not too dystopian, but quite satirical look at how this country's eaten itself. So, but a lot of those just came from little 15 minutes. This was in my head, and I sort of wrote that, and actually I'll turn that into a chapter. I'll elaborate on that. So it's good in terms of creative. And I've carried notebooks with me right from when I was young. Always carried, before phones. These I tend to sort of, if an idea, a spark, capture the sparks. That's what I say. If an idea comes to my head, I'll put it on my phone. I'll email it to myself. But in the past, it was notebooks. I've got loads of these, just little black notebooks that I've carried around and just captured the thoughts that come into my head.
And can you switch off in a way? Because you see, you've got, how many books have you got? And
I don't know. A few.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
There's so many books. You're running this business.
Yeah.
You're constantly traveling. What happens to you just being calm or having a moment? Do you learn to enjoy that now?
Yeah. I can still wake up at 2:00 in the morning, and then the brain kicks in, and then okay, right, well, I may as well just get up and do some stuff.
And is that advice for you? Is that like to follow that? Some people would fight that for you.
Well, I'm fortunate in that, because I don't have to be in an office or a classroom at 8:00 the following day, that I can then. But I've also found, I suppose as I got older, you need less sleep anyway, that I can do 3 hours in the middle of the night and then still do a full day without being too tired. So it's lying in bed trying to get back to sleep when your brain's whirring and clicking, and that ain't good. So do get up and do stuff. Nature is my solace, I suppose. So ever since I was 9 or 10, my grandfather down in Devon gave me a book on birds, and it's just sort of interested in birds, and so I'll go into the woods, go resonate with the trees. I'm fortunate in my home I've got a home in Wales as well as where we are for my wife's work, and I've got a little bit of woodland. I've got 53 trees, I think it is, and I can just sort of just stand there and just be still, and that's where I find my stillness, I think, in nature, and looking at the birds and trying to quieten my brain down a little bit.
Do you think that's often what new teachers lose, is the sense of all those beautiful things that they had before, and ways that they found peace? Because they have often when I teach at Sheffield with the not called NQTs now, but
early career to ECTs, are they?
They just have so much energy and thirst and drive and passion for it, and they're just the switch off. They've not really been taught.
No, it's brutal. That first year of teaching is really hard because you've got to learn your craft.
Yeah.
You didn't really learn it on a PGC
No.
or a B.Ed. You've got to learn your craft, and there's so much to do. And it's a sort of job where there's always 47 hours in every 24 hours worth of work to do. So learning to switch off. And this is where having a good mentor or a tutor or a good leader above you is really important. That the head teacher who is prepared to say you don't need to work so hard. When I was a French teacher, there was a colleague who was just so stressed because you could see, even in my NQT ECT year, I could just see how stressed he was, and he was on beta blockers, I think, in the end, and you could see why, because he was trying to get the job done.
Yeah.
And I think, well, the job will never get done. The job's always bigger. And I realised then you've got to have what I call the fuck it switch.
Yeah.
You've got to have the switch that goes,
That's my new book. It's sort of like not giving a fuck.
yeah, just fuck it. That's it. The job will always be, there's always more to do, but I'm going home now. It's okay. It'll be there tomorrow. It's okay. So that I think that's it. And
there's an art to it, though, isn't there?
Yeah, you've got to learn it, and but you've also got to be, as a new teacher, you've got to be given permission to use it. And if you've got a leadership team which is all about, you've got to be there before everybody else, you've got to leave after everybody else. I'll value you by how hard you work, how many extra hours you put in. Then that's a dangerous school to be in. And again, a story I share with head teachers about this is the apocryphal maybe, but the guy who died at his desk. But nobody noticed because he was always the first one in and the last one to leave. So people would walk in and go, "Oh, Joe's at his desk," and I'm like, "Oh, Joe's still at his desk. Joe works hard," and Joe was dead. Wow. And I'm saying to head teachers, would your staff notice?
Yeah.
Oh, the head's always in his office. He's always there. He's always the last to leave. If you, not would they care, but would they notice if you were there? So it's this, being able to choose your, prioritize first. And again, the example that a lot of people use these days is, on the aeroplane with the oxygen masks, and you've got to put your own on before you help anybody else. It's those sorts of things. So as a early years teacher, as a early career teacher, ECT, look at what's expected of you. So it's a difficult job, it's a hard job, there's a lot of the job anyway, that's just the nature of it. But if the model is you will work yourself into the ground.
Which of your associates talks more of this sort of mental health and well-being?
Nina Jackson, I mean, a lot of them touch on it, and a lot of them have got experience directly of that world, if you like. So we're all
fall into it.
We've all, like I said before, we've all got our scars and our bruises and our t-shirts from this world. But Nina Jackson,
I've been there, man.
I've seen her get standing ovations from being, talking about well-being and self-worth and all sorts, as well as being a fantastic teacher. She can talk about teaching and learning and creativity and technology for learning. She covers lots of things, but because of the need.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw that out there.
No, you need to.
That's wrong, isn't it?
There's a video that's on our website. It's also on YouTube of her speaking at the SSAT event just before COVID. So that'd be 2020, something like that.
Okay.
She was one of the last people to speak to the main hall in this big exhibition centre in the middle of Birmingham, and talked about well-being and looking after yourself, and got this most amazing standing ovation. No one had seen that group of people respond in that way to anybody before. It was absolutely stunning. Wow. So do check that out. But there are others as well. I mean, even people like Jazz Amplify. She was a associate for a while, but she's love her to bits. So she's gone off to sort of doing different things. But I'm working on her book with her for the Independent Thinking Press. So
brilliant.
And she's got a story to tell. Again, it's about being human first and mental health and prioritising mental health. And
did she get Speaker of the Year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and rightly so.
Yeah,
she's a phenomenal speaker, but and a hell of a story to tell as well. So, yeah, we were probably Independent Thinking is probably one of the first organisations that ran an event, a national event for well-being and mental health around young people, and then talking about our own experiences. And I mean, we had family members there like Phoebe talking about bereavement, talking about our own experiences, and
another avenue.
It was a very powerful. But this was us saying we know there's a problem coming around mental health in young people, so let's start these conversations going. And we were, I'm proud that we sort of led the way on that, and in other areas as well. We're not the most well-known organisation, we're not the richest organisation, but we are, again, authentic, compassionate, and creative when it comes to what we want to share with people. Why
is mental health not really looked at with it? I mean, it's probably is getting better now, right? It's just the environments that I go in. So through my lived experience,
Yeah.
the conversations there at least, and the teachers are recognising it through who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
But I know you've got a broader scope, to be honest. But yeah, just definitely not in my day where I was at. So why was there no look at mental health?
There was a huge, my perception of it is, and my sort of lived experiences, there was the perception that it was a stigma, it was a sign of weakness, it didn't really exist. We didn't have, depression in my day. We just got on with stuff. So there was a bit of that sort of stiff upper lip, get on with it.
It's where the generational trauma comes from.
Well, that's another thing as well, isn't it? That, it was. I was trauma.
Yeah.
This sort of, it didn't do me any harm.
Yeah.
Being soundly beaten every day by my teachers and then by my father. And actually, yes, it did. You're a very damaged individual. Something you said earlier when we were chatting in one of your buses. Damaged people. Damage people. Is that
Hurt
what you
people,
said?
hurt people.
Hurt people. Another one I've made a note of.
We do this to each other. Right? There'll be a big list later on that drive. Notes is straight out.
So there was that stigma. And then it just takes a few people of note to start talking about it and open up about it, and then suddenly people go, actually, it is a thing, and actually, I am suffering. I am. For me, one of the biggest ones, and I'm not a royalist in any way, but when Harry and William started talking about how things were for them after the death of their mother, how they were treated and mistreated in terms of being allowed to grieve, and then the impact that had on their mental health. When suddenly the Daily Telegraph was talking about that and mental health, it then opened the doors. That I noticed that it opened up the doors to that generation and those sorts of people who read the Daily Telegraph to actually say, well, actually, no, I think maybe we need to have a conversation about this. So suddenly it became, and it did seem quite sudden, it became okay to talk about it, that it wasn't a sign of weakness, that actually talking about it was a sign of strength. And then the more, people in the news, whether it's sports people or film stars or politicians, anybody, who were people of significance who were able to then open up, it just allowed other people. So when our associates, like Jazz as she was as an associate, or Nina now, are able to talk about their experiences that they went through their lives, it's powerful, it's shocking, but it's that permission. There are people in the audience who have held these secrets for fear of being stigmatized, for fear of losing their job, for fear of being seen to be weak. And then suddenly here's somebody on a stage talking about their experiences, which were my experiences, and therefore I can now talk about my experiences. So it's incredibly liberating in an emotional roller coaster of a way.
Do you, because I'm curious to this, and I have just a feel of it is empowering, it is liberating, and there's a togetherness in it, and especially if you can let that channel the better side of you. Do you have a concern where people do use it as a bit of a victim mentality? Yeah,
there's a sense of being careful with it, I think, and it's easy to
collate in different badges and labels.
Yeah, I had this terrible childhood, therefore that it's not my fault.
And then that's it. That's where you sit.
Yeah. No, I do see that, and we need to move beyond that, because that's not in anybody's interest.
Again, do you think that just comes down to education, where you can have good open discussions and not just park people there and say, that's terrible, that's terrible. Yeah. Okay, what we're going to do with that, though?
It's like hope things can get better, and I can do something about it, and agency and responsibility. And I mean, again, this is what Jazz Amplifier in her speeches and her book that we're working on with her. It's how, when she says, I don't, people go, oh, you're so inspiring. It's like, I don't care. What are you going to do as a result of being inspired by me? And same with Nina as well. Oh, you're so inspired. Yes, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to change things? How are you going to make things better for you or for the people around you? So we've been victims. We may have been victims, but that doesn't mean to say we need to stay incapable. We need to have our agency and have our power, which is why when you go somewhere and hear somebody like Nina or Jazz talking, it is that sense of, look what they've been through and look what they're doing. Yeah. So if they can do that, I can do that. I have more power. One of our our actual newest associate, Claire Lomas, was a horse rider, eventing, and had an accident and ended up paralysed in a wheelchair. And then, speaking to her and reading her story, she started off thinking about the limitations of her new life in a wheelchair, and then realised there weren't any. So then, she's doing the London Marathon in these sort of bionic legs. It's taken her 17 hours to walk round, but she's done it.
Where'd you go meet her?
Oh, it's a long story, but it's all about resonance and vibrations and a bowls club in the middle of Leicestershire.
Corby.
Not Corby, this one.
Oh, no.
Leicestershire, not Northamptonshire, yeah. And so just an inspiring story, but also very down to earth. And it's the story she tells is, this is my story, but I don't want pity. I'm not a victim, but I want you to know that you don't have limitations either. The things you think you can't do, there'll be a way of you can find to do it. And she's getting a pilot's license. She's got a motorcycle racing license. She has to be lifted onto the bike, but then she can sort of race around, and she's doing all these things. So there aren't any limitations, and then it comes back to all this stuff that Durham all those years ago. The limitations that we have are actually in our head, and we don't have them. We might have obstacles, we might have hurdles. There might be things we need to do. There will be things we need to do, but that doesn't mean to say that we're held back by anything other than our own thoughts.
Mate, I am honestly going to leave it there now.
Yeah, I think we need to. We've got to drive to
I've literally
Crewe.
kept trying, but then I'm like, oh my God, we're going to go down. Thank you so much for this. I genuinely feel refreshed. I feel buzzing. I've got 2 new football teams at the minute who keep losing. So my energy's been a little bit low. I'm like, I don't go in losing teams. I don't know what's happening. And that's where I've been. And this podcast today has really, really energized me. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a great
thank
day.
you for having me. And I'll come back.
Will you promise?
We'll do more.
Yeah, I think
30 years is a lot of stuff to unpack.
Many books later, many years. This. You've got a resident spot whenever you want it on the Old Farm bus.
Thank you.
If anybody listening to this would like to get in touch, ITL, Ian Gilbert.
Yeah, go to if you go to independentthinking.com or .co.uk, you can sort of get in contact that way. Or if you do Ian at independentthinking.co.uk, I'll get that email. Or at ITL Worldwide on Twitter, X.
Are you bothering with socials yourself now?
I more than probably I should, but also a lot of good people. There's a lot of good folk on Twitter. There's a lot of rubbish there, and you block and mute. Follow selectively, but there's some good stuff going on. There's some that's really eye-opening and really useful, and we've got 17,500 followers, and that's
reclaim your Twitters, reclaim your Instagrams, take them back, use it as a tool.
Use it as a tool for positivity and openness and curiosity, and because they've been transformation. Twitter more than any of the other ones. I don't do Facebook or TikTok, bit of Instagram. But Twitter has been transformational in terms of people that I've met and conversations that I've had and knowledge that I've picked up and coming at the world in a different sort of way. But it's very messy now. It's like, it just reminds me when you scroll down of like a sort of a jumble sale at a church. There's everything out. Everybody's shouting at you, and it's but there's some good stuff in there. So is that
a bit of Elon's fault, do you think?
Oh,
or?
yeah.
Yeah, he's a cheeky boy. He's a wild one. Cowboy.
Yeah, there's a lot that's his fault. Anyway. So at ITL Worldwide, just reach out on there. But I'm always happy to have a chat.
Thank you for that. I'll do my bit, the close down. Thank you for this. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'll leave you on this. I always do, and I always will. Just be nice to one another. You're a beautiful set of buggers. See you later.